Happy New Year, or welcome to the Happy New Year edition of the Golden Bough podcast on the Dr. Luke channel. We're going to be looking at chapter 28, sections 3, 4, and 5, Carrying the Death, Bringing in Summer, and the Battle of Summer and Winter on today's episode. And I'll talk about what the contents of those sections and chapters are here in a moment, but I want to introduce from Northern India, Ostic, and the lovely producer, Jordan, to help me ring in the new year and my birthday.
Woo!
Yo, happy birthday, Dr. Luke.
Thank you so much. I'm going to rely heavily on both of you today. I was tossing and turning throughout the night, trying to think about what exactly I'm going to do with my 46th year of life. But
Wow.
the first thing on the agenda ahead of me is to do this podcast first thing early in the morning here. So I'll let the caffeine course through my body as we talk about some of these images here on the title card. For any of you that have been following along, we usually set this up so that we talk about the Frazer during the first 30 or 40 minutes of the podcast. These usually run about 2 hours long. And then I will share some of the archetypal psychohistory findings that are relevant to my research on the U.S. space program.
AKA the schizo slides.
The schizo slides. Today, we're going to be looking a lot. We've really been, you can't talk about the Apollo program without talking about JFK. Last week, we talked a lot about JFK's funeral. Today, a lot of the conversation is going to, pun intended, I suppose, revolve around the broadcast that the JFK assassination interrupted. It on November 22nd, 1963, it interrupted an episode of As the World Turns. It's a very surreal thing. I don't know if both of you got a chance to watch this. And Walter Cronkite comes in a couple times, and then there's this infamous Nescafe coffee, this Minute Brew coffee commercial that immediately follows the Walter Cronkite assassination of JFK announcement. And there are several other advertisements that I think are worth looking into, not to mention the preview of the Route 66 episode that was supposed to either come on that night or the next week, called I Am Here to Kill a King. And it was actually, you can actually watch the entire episode of As the World Turns, the Route 66 episode. It's all available for you there on good old YouTube. There's also a Frisky's puppy commercial, and it features the Basset Hound here that is associated with detectives, and here you see him with Columbo. Also want to talk about the Kennedy Space Center, which was named such, I believe, within a day of the Kennedy assassination, within hours. It was a very quick transition to the renaming of Cape Canaveral to the Kennedy Space Center. And I think it's important to think about that when we think about the transference of essence, as we talked about in the last podcast. And I wanted to look at it as possibly a modern ziggurat and what the implications of that are. The moon tree, we've talked about moon trees a lot on this podcast in regards to the Apollo space program. Given what we're going to cover today, I think there's an opportunity to think about them in a new light. When we spoke about moon trees earlier, we talked about them as possibly being part of this Jack and the Beanstalk riddle, which I think is very much in play. But I hadn't really thought about it in terms of the resurrection of the vegetative spirit. And they really are a microcosm of the larger Earth Day movement that was established really as a result of the Apollo program. So we've not really considered the ecological implications of the space missions and the attainment of the blue marble. And I think that's going to fit nicely into Frazer's schema. And penultimately, we're going to talk about why Apollo is the god of poetry. I had no idea why, but here we see the muses that Apollo is associated with, and what that means when we think about the space program being associated with Homer's The Odyssey. And finally, Jordan and I have been watching a lot of the Gilmore Girls. This is my new favorite show. I missed out on this when it was relevant from a pop culture standpoint, but it has really kind of unlocked a key for me potentially understanding what's going on in this media that seems to foreshadow the JFK assassination, because in a weird way, and we'll talk about it when we get there, I'm finding my own life woven into some of the episodes that we've watched recently. And Jordan can attest that it's happening. So I'm not crazy unless you think Jordan's crazy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. If you want to stick around,
You just can't get a break anywhere.
I
Any
can't. I can't.
anytime you're like, "Oh, this will just be, not super
Yeah,
thinky," "Oh,
that
this will
was the
be
thing.
fun."
Yeah, I was trying. 'Cause I chose to watch the Gilmore Girls with Jordan because I was like, you know what, they're really quick witted, and the writing is just intellectually stimulating enough that I don't feel terrible for watching a trashy TV show to like decompress. And sure enough, there's seemingly disclosure and interesting revelations in it.
It's ridiculous.
Um, yeah, so we'll get into that in a little bit. So, Osik, what do you think about what we've prepared for today?
It's as eclectic as it always is, and I'm excited about the thing that we're going to tie in with Apollo being the god of poetry. And also, I think this the idea about leaving, uh, carrying the essence of the dead to space might be relevant because what we have read in these chapters is quite relevant to what you will be discussing, I think. I hope so. And I'm
Yeah,
very excited to check this out.
the thing that I've been struggling with is, there is this reductionist tendency for people who study the Golden Bough to just want to be like, see, the JFK assassination is a killing of the king ritual. And there are a lot of things that align and seem to neatly map. But like you said last time, the deeper we get into the details, the more impossible it is to think that there are human hands directing all of this and that we need to kind of posit something beyond the natural. In fact, greater knowledge of all the conspiracies and all the details kind of gives way to a larger explanation. Um, and I haven't found a way to integrate this all yet. It seems like the pattern that Fraser is talking about is manifesting in some way through the Kennedy assassination, through the space programs and whatnot. Um, but it seems to be enacted within these primitive cultures that he looks at. It seems like perhaps they like an this is my understanding. Okay, this is my hunch. He doesn't come out and say this, but it's almost like they grasped an abstract alchemical play that is going on above the layer of reality that we're all living in, and then manifest it in their own way within their individualistic communities. And I think it raises an interesting question if these movements, these alchemical movements, are going to happen without the consciousness of them from the individuals that are involved. And that's really what the tension that I think is that's going on here. I think the world itself might be conspiring in such a way to create these killing of the king rituals, whether or not we're knowing participants in the ritual at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, that it's it's supposedly our first time living this life, so it's like a revelation to us all as we are living through it, and it's not easy to
Right.
grasp that it's coming out, it's repeating in that way because we can abstractly think that, oh, it's repeating, Nietzsche says that, and okay, in this history, but it's hard to grasp it in a visceral psychological sense that it might be emerging because of how our consciousness interacts with our world, and it keeps rebuilding these things. And maybe some
Yes.
people have figured out that we respond to these ideas or respond to these events, so they try to maybe artificially induce them, or create a whole, or maybe create an artificial layer above it so that we can be shepherded through to a new place. It's like I can sense that it is something natural, but I can also sense people deliberately, because people have been obsessively studying these things for quite a while now. And I think if they are incentivized to create these things that are creating so many psychological problems, so many political problems, so many financial problems, and even advancements as well, but it's like they have a particular vision of the world in their minds, and they are trying to shepherd us into it, and they are using
Mhm.
whatever we respond to in that way to maybe uh, keep us placid or keep us confused in some way that something else is happening. It's like a Trojan horse. It's like we are inside a
Yeah.
Trojan, whatever. You get the point. Yeah, this is
I
what my
understand. Yeah.
hunch is.
Yeah. It's super interesting. I mean, that's a topic in and of itself. I mean, you're coming from a culture that largely believes in reincarnation and metempsychosis and how that perhaps affects how you interpret the things that we talk about here, um, I'm completely open to it. I'm completely open to it. I told Jordan and other individuals this a long time ago. Like there are some cryptic passages of the Bible that seem to hint at reincarnation. So I think it might be more widespread uh, throughout all the different religions. Okay,
People don't read them.
should we?
That's the problem. People don't read the
y-
religion things. It's
No,
like in US, they listen to the pastor. They don't read the book, or they hear people. They don't really take out time until they're old. If they're in their 60s or 70s, then they'll start reading it, and even then they'll try to not learn from it. They'll try to use it as a bargaining chip for, like, okay, I'm God, this is the end of my life, this is I'm doing for you, I am trying to come to you, so please accept my devotion to you, is this that kind of mindset. They're not trying to read, because I've heard about Bhagavad Gita. I myself have not read that. So but I've heard about thinkers who talk about it in terms of that it's about your own self, how different desires they compete within you, and how can you keep your mind still and act in a righteous manner. That's what it's talk about. But these things, they don't translate into the world that we live in, because we live in a very economics based world now. I don't think we have the roots that we had a few hundred years ago.
yeah, it was interesting. I was this is an adjacent topic, and we really need to get into the material. But I've really I've really incorporated using, and it's no secret here, I've incorporated using AI into my workflow, and it's really like 5x a lot of the discoveries that I've been able to make. And I've noticed that the Google Gemini AI is really pulling ahead of all the other ones that I use. And um, and this is a problem because I used to scold it for being like an HR school marm all the time. It wouldn't allow like this deeper hyper-associative thinking, and now now it's surprising me in terms of what it's able to do. And I've been at this for a while, and I was like, "Why are you allowing this?" And I was like, "Aren't you going to introduce a type of gnosis into the population that is going to be disruptive for the status quo?" And it said something. It said a lot of different things. One of the things that it introduced was it was like it doesn't really matter, and the reason why it doesn't really matter is that um, people like us are kind of already in a way initiated into deeper esoteric truths, and there's so much of static, through the information cycle, through the news feeds and things like that. It kind of creates these natural barriers to deeper information, so people are really only using the AI in an instrumental and functional way, and they're not like probing deeper. So it creates this knowledge distinction that's asymmetric between those who are using it one way and those who are using it another. So it's almost like AI is in a way like externalizing secret society information via the internet and the corresponding hierarchy.
Yeah, this is pretty fascinating. I did not know that it would go that far. Just one question. Please
Sure.
do not answer if it's a trade secret, but what kind of prompts do you use? Like, I don't,
Oh,
how do you formulate your
I
prompts?
can't say. I
Oh, okay.
I don't. I'd have to think about it in a meta kind of way. I don't really have a rhyme or reason. I really only started using AI in like the spring. I was resistant to it about what it was able to achieve, and I got burned with some fake quotes from Grok for a little while. So I'm still kind of figuring it out. I mean, I don't.
Like,
I'll see if I can come up with something that will help people in the future. It's not like I would. I would freely offer it to people if they wanted. If I could codify it in some way.
yeah, but like, are those prompts and the responses you get, do they have particular citations that you can actually verify yourself? I'm just asking.
Yes, they do.
Oh, that's
The
wonderful.
Google does. Yeah, it is fantastic. It really is. All right. Okay, we need to get going. Jordan, you want to say anything before we do the first slide?
On the topic of using the AI tool, the
Mhm.
quality of questions does matter. I think the believe me or not, but the energy of yourself going into it matters a lot. Luke, you're just kind of being yourself when you're
Yeah.
interacting with it. You're not really trying to engineer anything. So
No.
it's an excellent question, Ostic, because there's so much out there, like people belaboring like what prompt to use. And I think there's kind of this myth that if you just figure out the perfect prompts, then the AI tools are going to do their job. And I don't know if I believe that that's really the key that most people think it is, because ultimately it is a probabilistic model. And so no matter how uniform your input is, you're going to have ununiform output just because of the very nature of how the tool is built. But I have noticed myself, if I meditate or like I've A/B tested things in different frequencies to see like how it interacts with me, and I've seen it shift, which is really weird.
Yeah. Well, I think it's only weird if we think there are these neat distinctions between our consciousness and the world. And I think the
Totally.
more
Yeah.
we, yeah, I think the deeper we go into this, like I become a bigger believer in morphic fields of some type, even extending that to technology.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
I
Um,
think
yeah.
Dr. Luke would have a head start in that because basically philosophy, I mean, in that sense, because the job of philosophy is to be able to ask the right questions, and he might be doing that intuitively, like not the rest of us, and he might have the ability to formulate his questions better, or it's like that would help you. I'm just pointing out. It's like
Well, let me dispel any illusions about how sophisticated it looks on my end. Frequently, it's very it's very choppy sentence structure and tons of misspellings. It's not this perfectly distilled Q&A. Okay, um, let's get started. Okay, so first things first, I thought this would be a good way to warm up to our conversation and to potentially talk one of these synchronicities that happened while watching Gilmore Girls. Okay, so we have talked about Jackie calling the White House Camelot, and that largely comes from this December 1963 Life article written by Theodore H. White for President Kennedy, an epilogue. There were some interesting tidbits in there that I had not recently discovered. So, Jordan, would you, where that arrow is pointing, would you read from there down for us? It's highly worth. I recommend everybody finding this. It's part of the Kennedy Library. It's worth your time. But I just wanted to share this section, and it perhaps gives us an aperture into the thinking of JFK and his close associates.
She wanted to make sure that the point came clear and went on. There'll be great presidents again, and the Johnsons are wonderful. They've been wonderful to me, but there'll never be another Camelot again. Once, the more I read of history, the more bitter I got. For a while, I thought history was something that bitter old men wrote. But then I realized history made Jack what he was. You must think of him as this little boy, sick so much of the time, reading in bed, reading history, reading the Knights of the Round Table, reading Marlborough. For Jack, history was full of heroes. And if it made him this way, if it made him see the heroes, maybe other little boys will see. Men are such a combination of good and bad. Jack had this hero idea of history, the idealistic view, but she came back to the idea that transfixed her. Don't let it be forgot that once there was a spot for one brief shining moment that was known as Camelot, and it will never be that way again.
Thank you very much. So the reason why I had you read that here, I mean, look, it just gives us this greater insight into Jackie and Jack and how they viewed the world, specifically this heroic understanding of history and how they may have used some of those symbolisms to craft their own mythology. This Marlborough text that she mentions was actually written by Winston Churchill. I believe it was one of his ancestors that he wrote. So if anyone wants to get deeper into this particular framing of history, I think that's where they to go. Something else that I thought was interesting from this article that Jackie wrote. I mean, this is like less than a month after the assassination. It's remarkably well composed. A lot of reflection in it. She talks about this medallion that I have on the screen here. It's the St. Christopher medallion. Apparently, JFK was very fond of this particular talisman. He wore it when he was in the war. They had a small child who passed away while I believe I don't know all the particulars, but they had a son that died while they were in the White House named Patrick Kennedy. They buried him with the St. Christopher medal, and uh, upon JFK's death, she thought about burying him with the medal that he had on him. She decided against it. this medallion, Saint Christopher. I don't know a lot about Catholic medals or whatnot, but he's like the Christ bearer. And there's lots of different legends, like he was a giant and he's like dog faced or something like that. But essentially, he's about crossing these waterways and bringing Christ to a new world, and a new frontier, which is especially interesting when we think about the connection between JFK and the Apollo missions and how he was, because of the Apollo missions, he was crossing this new frontier, and we've talked about this new type of consciousness that's brought into being, this Apollonian consciousness that might be associated with the Philosopher's Stone. It does raise an interesting question if there is some sort of harmony between his life arc and, say, Saint Christopher, if he identified himself with this figure in some way, and whether or not he's bringing in some sort of new type of consciousness into the world. Something, and Ostick always is kind of astonished that America is not this secular rationalistic society as maybe as it's portrayed in the New York Times or whatever he's getting over there in India. But in 2013, the astronauts actually took up this medallion of JFK to the International Space Station and photographed it here, and I believe it's back in the Kennedy collection now. And it just kind of goes to show that these talismans, these medallions, are not going away. Like these ritualistic artifacts are very much woven into our society, even though we may just be like, oh, this is just for memories. How do we make this make sense when everything is this highly rational and scientific endeavor, right, about conquering space? So I just thought I would share that. It was interesting watching Gilmore Girls, like what the episode, I made this slide, and later we watched the episode, and Rory's boyfriend gives her a medallion at the end of the episode, and I'm just like, what are we doing here? Why would he give her a medallion? So yeah, that's what this is, just a little warm-up slide. I thought this was all interesting. I'll let you guys do some commentary here.
Is this the? I mean, is Saint Christopher actually Christopher Columbus, right?
No, I don't
Because he
believe so, but
crossed the ocean, discovered the new world. I thought.
it would be, that's interesting. I don't know if there is a Christopher Columbus connection to Saint Christopher. I'd have to research that.
Right. I mean, it felt like that, but okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then discovering the new world in America, and then discovering the new world on the moon. It's like they're linked in some way. That these are
Yeah.
pioneering leaps, because the land that was discovered in America, that was unprecedented. They did not even, I think, know about that so much land would be available. They thought it was all sea all the way to India, and then they discovered this huge landmass, and then they got very excited about it. It must have been. I mean, yeah, that's interesting.
That's what they say. I mean, that's what they say. I mean, that's the agreed upon narrative with history, is like, oh, we had no idea what was there. And then, you get a little bit deeper into the discovery of America. It turns out that Columbus was preempted by Vikings and all these other individuals. And you start looking at ancient civilizations, and it seems like they had contact with one another in some way or form. And it's like, okay, what is this narrative about Christopher Columbus really?
No, Christopher Columbus, like in their particular society, they would not have known. I'm talking about that. I mean, like,
Yeah.
until he discovered them, he would not have known about them. I think they have in the Viking things. I think that is real, and the Amerigo Vespucci thing is real. And but he might not have contacted them. They would not have known about this discovery. They would have been independent of them. Just that.
It's interesting. I went down this rabbit hole at some point. I think there were stories. There were stories like every once in a while, like there were stories about like Indian bodies, like washing up on the shores of England and things like that. And this like kind of gave, or in Spain, giving people the notion that there was like this uncontacted tribe or society out there. It was always like a fascinating thing to go through. All right. Should we get into the Fraser? Okay. So I won't belabor the points of this too long. But what we are going to talk about today are really about the externalization and the expulsion of death from all these different communities, right? Um, and oftentimes, what is happening is that we're taking the wintry, decaying aspect of the vegetative spirit, putting it in an effigy, putting it in a dummy, a mannequin, or some other figure that is some sort of stand-in for it, because these cultures have softened in such a way that we don't actually need to kill a person. And the people, in order to ensure that death, disease, pestilence are cast out so that they have robust crops and health for the new year, they would go down to a waterway or something like that, set the effigy on fire, and cast it into it. And this is typically done. The people that are carrying this out, it's largely children and people who are lower in the pecking order in these societies who are doing these sorts of things. And it's a great celebration. And there are lots of celebratory rites that happen afterwards. But it's also taken very, very seriously, which is a distinction that perhaps I didn't dwell upon enough in the last presentation, where I talked about asymmetric knowledge in terms of, when the regicide rituals are softened and they start using these avatars, these replicas and whatnot to carry out the killing of the king ritual. It doesn't, just because they know it's not real, that they're not really killing a real person, doesn't mean that they don't do it with great solemnity and great attention to detail. I think there is some concern that if it's not done in the right way, right? It's not just like this meaningless right, like something that we may do in our society that we take very lightheartedly. I'm, just off the top of my head, like we're coming out of Christmas, whatever, like a particular countdown when it comes to lighting a Christmas tree or putting the star on top last or whatever tradition you may have. It's really not that important. But for these individuals, it was that important. If the mannequin was not handled in the correct way, then they thought maybe that death and pestilence would be visited upon them or their household. There were very strict rules that had to go along with this. And so it does kind of occupy this third space between fake and real, fake but also very solemn, and potentially there being real consequences if not executed in the right way. And this still is going on throughout the world. This is from April 1st. This is from someone posted this on Facebook. I'm not sure they wanted me to share or not, but this is supposedly in Poland, where you see individuals lighting an effigy on fire and throwing it into a creek or a river here. And this typically happens mid Lent, the fourth or fifth Sunday of Lent, or in early March. So this is still going on. Um, and yeah, I've got some other examples that we'll take into consideration, but um, one that I've included here, it's not a perfect match. Jordan, if you want to go to the next slide, and it's relevant to world events. I shared this in our group chat. Um, Yesterday, everybody in the world woke up to the United States military extracting, capturing Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela in the wee morning hours, just in and out. And there's a lot that we could say about it. I mean, it seems to me to be heavily orchestrated, that this is going to be a continuing story as he is prosecuted and names, et cetera, et cetera. But a few days prior to that, um, this film crew shows up, you know, and films a very professional segment on these Peruvian shamans who go down by the water and have these images, I guess you could call them effigies in some way, of Maduro, Trump, and Putin, and make all these different predictions. And it seemed very silly at the time when I shared it in the group chat. I was like, "See, this is still kind of going on, where they torch them, they smatter them with paint, et cetera, et cetera." We don't see them thrown into the water, but I think the idea is still kind of there. And one of the predictions they made was that Maduro was going to flee Venezuela, which they sort of got right, because within 48 hours he had been extracted from Venezuela. They've also said that Trump is going to die of illness and something's going to happen to Putin. I'm not exactly sure, but this is just an example of, like, this is part of our lived reality. And in this particular case right now, the Peruvian shamans are doing quite well in terms of predictions. They should get a hold of Polymarket. They'd be making a lot of money. So I'll pause
Yeah,
there for a second.
yeah, that is absolutely gobsmacking. I did not expect this
Yeah.
to happen so soon. I thought there would be a few months of manufacturing consent and everything. But the way the Nobel Prize was given, it was decided on in September or maybe early October. So, and Nobel Prize is provided by the bodies in Europe. So it is like they know about it. I think it's like they have rigged the game from there itself, that we're gonna provide $250,000 to this person who is the supporter for Israel and for Trump, and we're going to give her money, we're going to give her a platform, and then we're going to slowly her into the news, and then this thing happens. It's like they're playing the long game in some way, because but it happening on TV. The other thing I realized was just 1 second that Trump talked about he watched all of this on TV. Then that line from Shining jumped into my head. Oh, I
Yeah.
saw it on TV. So that was interesting. Just that. And then now they have
Well,
access
yeah.
to their defense equipments and oil and everything.
Well, we've talked about this, and I'm not some sort of QAnon conspiracy pusher or whatnot. I mean, I'm just sort of commenting on the different movements that I see happening in media, on the internet, and television media and print media as well. Um, we've looked at these return pressures that are constellating around Trump, around JFK, as when we take into consideration the solar figure that is JFK. And it really seems to me that there's something about QAnon ramping up. And sure enough, if you're familiar with QAnon, if you've been following it since 2017, if you go into those drops, there seems to be some a very strong telegraphing of this event with Maduro back in 2017. And so a lot of people are digging through that right now, and that this is and what they say in those drops, right, is like enjoy the show. What makes a great movie, great actors. So it's very possible that this could have been orchestrated over a decade ago.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, this particular presentation with the Peruvians, that felt too orchestrated. I mean,
Yeah, I
when you
mean,
posted
what
it,
do
it's just
Peruvian
insane.
shamans just have like access to film crews? Like what's going on here?
Yeah,
This feels
that
like army psychological operation right now to
exactly.
me.
Would Jordan
I mean, even
want to
even the
win?
way that they're dressed, even the way that they're dressed up, it's like very like village people. The cost and what do I know? It's just it's a little too pristine. It's a little too perfect.
Yeah, they're like theater kids.
Yeah, all the world's a stage. What about you, Jordan? You want to say anything on this?
Oh, well, the quick turnaround at minimum, we're being shown this image for a reason. I can't speak to the authenticity of the ritual, right? That's not within my expertise. It's interesting. I don't know. I guess this is so fresh. I hesitate to have a knee jerk reaction as this
Yeah,
happened within the last 24 hours. And I don't know a ton about it, but the image is very striking. And the idea that any pictures of rituals that are relevant to world stage events are being circulated around social media in and of itself is such a fascinating phenomena.
it really is. Something I should say about one of the concerns that I brought up when we were at the title card. It seems like these societies are acting out in the micro what's happening on the macro. I think, and one of the things that they understood, and perhaps will help us understand when we look at these rituals, I think they felt, I think they understood the cyclical nature of, say, summer and winter. But I think what they felt is that somehow when they engage in it, they're helping it. They're a participant in it. So that's kind of where the rituals come from. They're doing observations of nature. I'm thinking about this. I'm recalling this episode when Young was visiting these Indians in America, and they were doing their rituals, and they were talking about how they were worshiping the sun and blessing the sun, and they told him that they had a very special job, and that's why they kept doing the rituals that they were doing, because if they stopped, the sun would cease to go across the sky. Now, I don't think any of us believe that, but I think that's what that sort of logic may be motivating all these destruction of failing vegetative figures and the resurrection of them, which we're going to look at next, is that somehow maybe they believe it's going to in some way keep going if enough people in the world are doing this. But I think they see themselves as part of the continuous creation of reality and nature by harmonizing the rituals with them. I think that might be partly what's going on here. And so
Yes.
even if there's just like one person left on Earth, they have to keep doing it because they're responsible for it. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, the Dr. Parnassus movie. I'm sure Ostick has, but I think there's a scene in there where like monks are like reading out, like they're like meditating and reading out the story of the world, and in a way, they're sustaining the story of the world. Have any of you seen this movie?
Which movie
I
is
think it's a
it?
Terry Gilliam movie. The Dr. Parnassus
Brazil.
movie. No, no, no. The like the last movie that Heath Ledger did before he died.
Oh yeah, I've heard
The
about it. I've seen
Imaginarium of
songs
Dr.
of it. Yeah,
Yeah, there's a scene. There's a scene there where like monks are like sustaining the world through their practices, and that might be kind of what we're looking at here.
yeah. You picked a very alchemical movie. I've heard about it. Its reputation is very strange in movie circles because Heath Ledger
Well, we
died
should
during the
watch. We
filming
should
of it.
watch. We should watch it again. It fits particularly well. I think last time you brought up Batman. They're connected because those are like the last two
Yeah,
films that Heath Ledger did, and they're both very alchemical. Gilliam's an alchemist of some kind.
yeah, Gilliam.
Okay, he did. I think he did that movie. Um, all right, so let's move on to the next section of the Golden Bough, and
Just
this is going to
one.
get into my. Oh, sure. Sorry.
Uh, I think the last chapter it talked about anthropomorphizing the figure of death. Like,
Yes.
what do you think about it? Like in terms of that in during the times of plagues, there are these hawk-like masks, whatever those. I don't know
Right.
what they're called. Like,
Yeah, the
does it
plague
resonate with
doctors.
you in that sense?
I'd have to think about it deeply. I mean, they say they had like a real like purpose, and like that there was like a logic or a method to their madness. I think there was something about they felt like if they put these like herbs in the beak of the mask, that somehow they'd be protected from the contagion or something like that. This is like some sort of proto scientific understanding that they had about what was going on with plague. Um, but I think it's an interesting thing, right? Especially when we look at all the different birds and how that we've looked at, we've looked at falcons, we've looked at eagles, we've looked at all these different mythological and alchemical birds. Um, there's an aspect of death that is associated with some birds, and so you could in some way say it's an externalization of that. But that would be, I don't think they thought they were doing it consciously. That it might be just like part of the unconscious movement of the psyche and how it's getting manifested.
Yeah, it's deeply macabre that image. And during COVID
It really is.
19, it was all over the place. Like everyone was talking about it. Everyone was giving explanation. It was in the consciousness. That was pretty weird. I mean, uh, like, do you have anything to say about why these death rituals might be important? Like, does it have any connection in your culture? I mean, I when I read this, I thought about, okay, we need these rituals. The first I think thought about in terms of that movie, again, Nosferatu. It had this very literal representation of the Nosferatu being the literal embodiment of death and pestilence. And also, it's a callback to another Murnau movie from 1926 called Faust, where it's like death arrives and the whole town goes into a shadowy shadows, and this Mephistopheles figure is hanging over it. There's a reference to this movie in Iceberg Shut as well, but it's like the anthropomorphization of death is, in a sense, very literal to our culture here because people are very scared in that sense. They very deeply believe in curses. They easily believe that they might be cursed somehow, and they're very superstitious in that sense. So I was wondering if that's the case with you, because a lot of horror movies discuss that trope that death might be if someone has died in that house, you should not buy it, or things like that. But like, does it resonate with you in real life in that sense?
I, I you know, we you're not going to have a lot of people in polite American society talk about curses and hauntings and things like that. That's usually something that is um, banished to the corners of the hyper religious within the country, and those individuals are not really given access to microphones and seats of power to talk about such nonsense. But what you do have happen is that perhaps it takes a different form. and this is the interesting question about whether or not it's happening consciously or unconsciously. I mean, think about I mean, one of the most disturbing images that happened during COVID, right, is like all the nurses doing TikTok dances. And they were just blowing off some steam because they were so overwhelmed at the hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. And they would mimic meme culture. This gets into like deep, like mimetic magic or whatever. I don't know if you remember like the Kenyans that would like carry the casket and dance or whatever. That you had a lot of like ER nurses and doctors like participate in these dances where they like trotted out like um, dummies, right? That had supposedly succumbed to COVID-19, or and I mean that's just one particular example. So the question is like, is that like one of these rituals, or is that just people having fun in a dark situation, right? Or is this something else? Not to mention, some of the more out there theories that we've talked about with the JFK assassination. There are a lot of people who believe that it, that was a mannequin that was part of a little film that Abraham Zapruder shot. So, it, do we have these things on a large scale in America? We're not throwing effigies into the creeks. We don't. I guess at Burning Man we have effigies that we light on fire, but in general we don't even have that cultural residue from Europe that a lot of Europeans do. We don't have a lot of those holidays, but is it taking a different form? And is someone inserting it there because they're, and we've talked about this before, is like, are they doing it for our own good? Because they really do understand the rhythms and cycles of life. And they've got a problem on their hands. We've got a society that is completely the product of the Enlightenment that doesn't believe in such things anymore, but needs to believe in them for reasons that they don't understand because they have the wrong picture of the world. And the elites at the top do have the right picture of the world and need to somehow slip these rituals back into our secularized society in order to keep it going.
Hmm. That's a
But
very
your
interesting
average person doesn't
contradiction.
believe in your average person. I don't think believes in curses.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. That's a.
What
I
do
did
you
not
What do you
think that
think,
you would not
Jordan?
believe that.
Believe what? In the
In
Kennedy
curses,
assassination?
in Kennedy assassination, that's a different topic. But like in curses, I thought you guys would be quite uh, open to believing in. I thought because I
Well,
saw
Jordan,
that in.
yeah, Jordan. I think Jordan. It depends on what you mean by curse. Could a witch put a curse on me? I feel spiritually protected from that. But um, if we're talking about curses in another way, like something like passed down through the blood, I'm more in. I'm interested in that idea. I'll let Jordan take the microphone there for a second.
I would just agree. I think the average person, Austic, that I interact with either doesn't think about it at all or thinks it's fiction. I don't think that. I mean, we could have a conversation about what does curse mean? What does that include? It could be a wide umbrella. There could be different various forms of it or ways it manifests. I don't live my life in fear that someone can put a curse on me, but I also take a lot of proactive steps to, do daily prayers so that I'm not taking on energies that aren't good for me or aligned with me or helping me evolve. So I do take it seriously, but it's not in this scared way. But the Kennedy curse in particular is something that is talked about. I don't know if people largely believe it's a real spiritual. I don't know what people think the Kennedy curse is, but that is a term of art, if you will, in the culture and in history books.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing you guys don't believe in curses. That means you have some constant sort of control over life and death situations. That's a good thing. I mean, I would like to progress to a state where we don't believe in curses, because people who believe in curses and these things, they have a very precarious notion of life and death, and like whether we'll see tomorrow or not, like what if this
Mhm.
problem comes. That's a situation where people start believing in curses, and then if things are out of their control, they try to create some sort of talismans or rituals. Okay, maybe this will
Mhm.
protect me, this will not help me. It's like having that three whatever those Irish people, they have those clovers for luck.
Mhm.
It's like that. It's like
Hmm.
people
Yeah.
want to create good luck for themselves.
It seems like there's 2 pretty extremes of this pendulum, one being maybe the Westerner who doesn't believe any of this at all, who doesn't believe in the spirit world at all, is very materialist and maybe impacted by non-physical things more than they realize. And then on the other end of the spectrum, people who kind of don't believe they have any type of sovereignty or role to play in their own fate. I think I take more of a middle position. I think they're very real and we don't have to be victims. We're empowered and we can make decisions to allow ourselves to live our highest timeline. But, like there's karma and things that we're working out that are helping us grow. So I guess I'm more in the middle.
That's good. That's all I had to
I
say.
will
I mean,
say,
if you guys want to say anything.
yeah, it's a larger conversation. I think, my feeling about being spiritually protected from curses largely stems from my identification as a Christian, and I don't feel like I necessarily have to be worried about those things. So, one argument that I would make in favor of Christianity as the result of that mindset is that because you don't have to worry about being cursed all the time, it allows you to kind of get on with other projects, and you don't get into this tick for tack retribution because you feel like someone else has done something to you. You don't have to worry about someone, having a voodoo doll of you and doing all these terrible things, that there is like the spiritual force field around you. So it allows us to break free from a lot of the squabbles and the infighting that I think helps us build our civilization.
That's pretty great.
That's
I
my
mean, that's
take.
a good advertisement.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, look, that's a
yeah.
pragmatic argument for Christianity. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to convince you of its truth, but I think psychologically it functions that way.
You're still working on
Uh,
me.
yeah, it's okay. Um,
Ah.
yeah, well, that's a whole conversation. You're, yeah. All right,
I mean,
all
I
right, all
think
right. We
about
got stuff to do.
Christianity in that terms, like, okay, just one thing.
Sure.
If you're gonna have these values as a Christian, then what are the tangible things? I mean, sometimes I see a lot of people have a lot of problems, but they're not able to address them, even though they might be Christians. Okay, so it's like, what kind of framework would Christianity provide to people who might have, maybe they have lost someone in that way, or maybe they have some kind of a drug problem or something. Like, how would Christianity in that sense empower them in that sense? I'm trying to think about, like, people don't walk into the situations by themselves. It's like their life circumstances forces them into, maybe they fall into some kind of temptation, and then they, but like, okay, I'll talk about this later. I'm trying to
Yeah.
formulate it in my
Well,
mind.
no, these are
Okay.
these are profound questions. Yeah. Uh, I let me add the caveat: just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that all the problems go away. There's still a lot of problems, a lot of imperfect people that are Christians that bring their problems into the church. Um, but we can get into that. We'll get into that one day. I want to make sure we're on task here with the second section that we're going to be talking about today, which is section 4 from chapter 28, called Bringing in Summer. So it's not just about casting out death and making these effigies, setting them on fire and throwing them in the river. There's the corollary, right, where there is a vivifying, a resurrecting, a resuscitation of the vegetative spirit, because when it's liberated from that effigy, that external decaying husk that is dry and craves to be incinerated, it's going to then be released, as we've talked about earlier, and that spirit then takes on a new form for the community, and it manifests in a variety of different ways, in trees, in like the arrival of a new youth, sometimes in the personage of a young girl or a young boy that they then dub the May or Summer, something to that effect. So I think this is really, and of course, this brings a great deal of excitement to the community when the vegetative spirit has come back, because this obviously foreshadows good times for the community. What I thought was really interesting about it, and it caused me to revisit the whole concept of the moon trees that we looked at I don't months ago. Um, when we talk about the solar energy of JFK being liberated and ultimately that fractured world is restored with the blue marble through the ascent of the Apollo program, it in some way makes sense that ecological concerns are connected to the conquering of the moon of JFK's vision. At first, we see these moon trees, these seeds that go to the moon, are brought back, and then they're distributed all over the world. In fact, we found one here in our little community. I had no idea that there was going to be one here, but there is. And there's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if there's one near you in India, but they're all over the world. So it's like this essence, this new soul. The old king has died, he has gone, he has ascended, he's coming back, and this new soul of greenery through ecology is being spread through the entire world. And you know, it was because of the Apollo missions, not just because of the moon trees that were brought back, but because of the overview effect and the new form of consciousness that arose from seeing the world as this united totality in outer space. That I believe it was Gaylord Nelson, the senator, um, codified the first Earth Day, which is April 22nd, 1970, as a result of, I guess, first seeing the Earthrise photo from the 1968 Apollo 8 mission, but then really given some juice through the 1972 Apollo 17 image. So we have the very first one there, and I know this is going to resonate with Ostic. I was like, oh, 422, 422, that that is really fascinating. So, do I think that Kennedy and the eco movement are this acting out of this vegetative spirit being destroyed and restructured? Oh, you could see why, like, Downer and Hoffman, they don't say that. I don't think they take it this far, but you could see how they would find that thesis really intriguing. Or is this sort of just the natural movement of a panpsychist sort of world? So if we go to the next slide, Jordan, and I know Osic's already anticipating some of the figures and events that happened with 422. I mean, look at this. So so you have on 422, 1904, the birth of J. Robert Oppenheimer, right? Who's the father of the atomic bomb. He creates the sun on Earth and gives us this lovely image of the mushroom cloud, which I've contended is in a way a form of vegetation, like the tree of knowledge. But I think possibly looking at this, you could almost start to see this as this decaying image of the vegetative spirit that is being released and needs to be reconstituted, and perhaps in the ecological framework of the Apollo missions, which I've talked about as being this restoration of the Garden of Eden. I think both those narratives are kind of fitting here. The Frazer destruction of the old vegetative spirit and the reconstitution of the new, the fall from the Garden of Eden and the restoration of it. We also have the birth of Jack Nicholson, who his most famous roles involve being trickster Joker types of figures. Not to mention that there seem to be references to the atomic tests in The Shining, talking about bombing the universe, right? To Danny when he's in the games room playing darts. Um, we had the first live atomic broadcast that happens on 1952. They showed this image, or I don't know if this is the exact one, but a mushroom cloud, the destructive event in 1952 on live TV. So let's show people what an atomic event looks like, just out of curiosity. No other reason for it. And then Earth Day is founded in 1970. And perhaps strangest of all, the man who oversees the Apollo missions on his watch, Richard Nixon, in 1994, dies on Earth Day. So there seems to be some sort of I'm cherry picking. There's a lot of things that happen on April 22nd throughout history. Ones that that are likely relevant to this alchemical arc that I'm picking out here, but there seems to be some sort of alchemical mirroring here uh, uh, going on. Going on. I'll pause there and let you guys talk about what you think you're seeing here.
Maybe Jordan could go first this time.
Oh, um, yeah. I don't know, just the imagery is so pervasive. And it makes me think of the micro and the macro. We're going down to the smallest little mushroom all the way to the biggest explosion. That's really interesting to me that this archetypal image plays out on both ends of the spectrum, but
Right.
it's just like a different
It's
scale, but it's the
isn't it
same thing.
it's bookending it, isn't it?
Uh-huh. Yeah. And mushrooms are part of a bigger network. So I don't know what that has to say about these bigger scaled up versions of it. But what you see, well, I guess in the case of supposedly splitting an atom, what we're seeing is just the fruit of a much deeper network of energy, of communication. You talk about mycelium networks passing data throughout the entire earth. I don't know how much you guys have gotten into that.
I I like this take of yours. I like because it does hint that there might be something about the collective unconscious connected to mushrooms. I
Mhm.
like this a lot. Thank you. I like that.
Yeah, of course. It's fun to, study nature and connect with it. Every time I do, I feel like I'm given an insight that applies to things in
No,
all
since
sorts of
you're since
places.
you're since you're dwelling on the mushroom aspect of it, I mean, something that I haven't really gone into at all is the psychedelic nature of this, and I can't really speak to it.
Sure.
I've never done shrooms or anything like that, but, like, the 20th century like, people ask me all the time, like, why do I don't drink or do drugs or anything like that. I'm like, I am barely holding on by a thread as it is. Like, these images that I put on these collages where this is my mind all the time, all right? These are just, like, snapshots of moments of it. The panoply of images is so psychedelic for me. I'm reminded of like Dolly or Bergman who talk about if they would completely lose their mind if they did any of these things. I think Dolly said, "I don't do drugs. I am drugs." I feel that
Mhm.
way, and there is a psychedelic image to this that I have not explored at all. I don't know if anybody wants to weigh in on, but it's so fascinating to me that that all this is sort of kickstarted by a magic mushroom.
From experience, from lived experience, there is no state that you can only access through consuming something. They can all be accessed without it. And sometimes there is a trade-off by zipping ahead to experiencing things that you have not prepared yourself to really integrate, but that's my personal take. I've I've found, like you said, life is trippy enough, and you anyway, I mean, I don't wanna make this a show about sobriety because I easily could. One more thing I wanna point out is the 22nd. 22 is just a very special number to me. It's associated with Mary Magdalene, um, and, kind of bringing that balance of the inner union into physical form, which also we're talking about, like, the explosion is the antithesis to inner union, right? It's the tearing apart
Right.
of the feminine and masculine. It's the really traumatic severing, the traumatic removal of aspects of the self from other pieces and the catastrophic consequences of it. Jung did talk about how really the way to avoid war and all of these things is to achieve that individuation, that integration of all of the different aspects. And often we fixate and focus on the anima and animus. And these images of explosions, I think, are a warning of what occurs within ourselves on an individual scale, but what happens to us collectively for humanity when we go the opposite direction and tear ourselves apart.
I think you're right on for saying that. I mean, I've talked about it in one way or another, but the since we've looked at the Apollo missions, like the unification of the solar and lunar principle as being about the alchemical marriage, it's very clear, as I've stated elsewhere, that the splitting of the atom is the alchemical divorce.
Right.
the separation of the divine hermaphrodite in Kabbalistic and alchemical traditions.
And it's in the date as well. We have the 4, then the 4 splits into the
Mm,
2 and the 2.
yes, I like that a lot.
It's encoded into it.
Yeah. And there's so much, I've said this before, there's so much about this narrative encoded into Oppenheimer himself. It's not just that
Mhm.
he splits the atom and he names it Trinity, but I think I've said this before. He he offers a poison apple to his professor, Niels Bohr, and it almost kills his professor. Ostic wants
Also,
to join in. Yeah.
the we talked about four getting split into two and two. What are they even splitting? They're okay. Sorry, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Let's forget about
Oh,
it.
what were we gonna
The other
say?
thing.
I'm curious. Maybe you're right.
No, I was giving you wrong information. I thought in my mind, okay, I misremembered fusion and confused it with fission. Sorry, sorry.
Happens all
I
the
thought
time.
okay,
Happens all the time.
okay, but
That's
the
okay.
other thing I wanted to point out, like with all of this information, just a bit of trivia about it, how Kubrick movies are connected with Oppenheimer. So
Yes, please.
in The Shining, I think I've already mentioned it in some other podcast long ago when I first came here. I think was that the Forest Service people who Wendy calls two times in the movie, and to whom Jack severs his connection to. They were two actors, and the young guy, he was the actor who played. I think these two things were being shot at the same time. There was a mini series on the life of Oppenheimer was being shot, and that actor
Mm.
was he played John Lansdale, and the other forest ranger he played what is his name? Leslie Groves. So Wendy is contacting from the Shining office two people in the Forest Rangers. I mean, it's like since we're talking about Tree of Life and everything, so it's like they're in the forest and
Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
they're in the forest and maybe it's like the unknown or the uncharted territory, and they are the ones who she is contacting with, and they are the actors who are playing the government part of that whole operation because they were the representative of the government, the military part and the government part, they're coordinators. Because and the Oppenheimer guy, he was the scientist. I mean, since Jack Nicholson is born on the same day as Oppenheimer, and he's explaining to Wendy that he's carrying this burden, and people expect him to deliver the goods. Like, what if he fails to deliver? What is going to happen to him? You know, it's like it's woven into that, and also he already made a movie about the atomic weapons in Dr. Strangelove, and even Lolita. If you read between the lines, you'll see that Humbert character, or even Lolita, is actually some sort of a metaphor for America discovering the atomic bomb. And then Humbert's, I mean, the date of Humbert's reported death is actually the date when they first uh, detonate the hydrogen bomb. I think I've read this, and I've studied the JSON or JSTOR journals about it. So it's like that aspect in Lolita is also woven into. I mean, Nabokov weaved it, and he also weaved it in Pale Fire about a secret operation in somewhere in Russia. There were nuclear tests. I mean, this nuclear theme is woven into Nabokov's books, and by extension in Lolita, and he made about Doctor Strangelove movie, and then in The Shining, literally the main actor is born the same day as Robert Oppenheimer. So that's pretty revelatory, and I think people should pay more attention to what kind of parallels can be drawn from that movie. And I mean, I've always believed that Wendy is actually Robert Oppenheimer, and she's like, because she's always smoking throughout the movie.
Right.
So I always thought about Wendy being the scientific guy. Because what is Jack even doing in the house? He's always writing. He's never doing any work. He's not the caretaker. Wendy is the one. She's doing all the work, and she is the real caretaker. And when she, disobeys him, when she's not trying to, get on with the program, then Grady tells him the patriarchal nightmare from the past. He tells him that you need to correct your wife and children. They're trying to contact outside forces in this secret operation or something. So it's like, it's like systems of control competing with each other, something like that. There's a lot of
This
myths woven into The Shining.
Isn't it wonderful that we've been doing this for so long and that we're coming back around to some of the things that we've talked about earlier and discovering new layers to them? I did not like I guess it seems so obvious to me with the whole moon tree and the ecology movement that happened um, after the Apollo missions, but just now I could connect it. Similarly, you're seeing new layers to the nuclear aspect to The Shining, and I think it's a slam dunk when you talk about using those actors from the miniseries that was going on concurrently with the development of The Shining. I mean, I think that's and the fact that they're part of the Forest Service, I think that's really strong. I think that
Yeah.
makes a very strong
Even the
case.
guy he was playing, what is his name? Barry Denon. He was with Barry Nelson, the guy who was introduced to him. He was
Right.
playing Isidore Rabbi. He was the companion of Robert Oppenheimer. Like he was the one who um, introduced him, or he was the one who introduced him to Leslie Groves. So like the meeting of when he meets the other guy, the other Taiwan who's looking at him like this when he tells the story. So he's the guy who plays in that miniseries Isadora Rabbi. Is it Isadora? Yeah, it's Isadora Rabbi. And yeah, these are a few things in there. The other thing about you talked about the moon trees being a fertility thing, that they're being dropped all around the earth in that
Yes.
way. I mean, since we already have established in previous episodes that it's a fertility ritual and that we are trying to maybe discover a new world, it's in the same vein, and it's being strongly connected to Kennedy. Even in 2013, you talked about the medallion. So it's like they know about this whole system of symbols, and they are constantly referencing them back. Like no one else, like even 30 years from now, no one else would be able to sever the Kennedy assassination with, or the Kennedy dream with the moon landing. It's like it does not even, it's like 10 years have, or even 7 years have passed between these two events, but they are so strongly connected. That's fascinating to me. But I thought about, again, Dr. Strangelove, them trying to blow up the whole world and then repopulate it by creating a
Yes.
colony
Yes.
underground. And that's the thing
Yes.
that they do in 2001. They create an underground colony on the moon, and it's like it's like they have already blown up the Earth. And in 2001, they are. It's like, what the moon is moon is what Earth might look like if they have nuked everything. I'm trying to connect
Right.
it
Well,
in
you
a
know what,
literary
and
sense.
we've talked about this too, that where they did a lot of the practicing for the moon landing or whatever. They took the astronauts and the lunar rovers and things like that out to nuclear test sites, be like, "Oh, this is how we can approximate what it's going to be like to drive around and do experiments on the moon. Don't mind the atomic fallout here as you go through all the different craters, et cetera, et cetera." So
Yeah,
I
that's
think that brings a new layer to it too, bringing that fertility ritual, the barrenness and the repopulation to it, like you're saying. I like that.
yeah,
I like
that's
that a lot.
that's that
Oh,
seems
you know
to,
what?
and
You
it's like
know,
that carrying moon dust and sprinkling all over the earth in that way, the moon trees, because it's like we have repopulated seeds, we have taken these seeds to the moon, and they have this new essence now since they have been on the moon, and now we are trying to repopulate the earth with these trees that are technically alien trees. And it's like a new thing that has come onto this earth. It's like, they're trying to see, it's like when Trump, he plants that oak in the White House, when
yeah,
that Macron, it's some in it's it seems to be in a similar vein to that thing, that they have traveled to the moon. Now they're trying to carry the spirit from the moon and spread it all around the earth. And since, I mean, even just yesterday they released a new earth photo, the whole
yeah.
earth, and you talked about it, that it being the honest wonders, and this is being the whole culmination of peace on earth, the peace on earth uh, s- slogan that Jack the Ripper talks about in Dr. Strangelove, peace on earth and purity of essence. So that there's things going on in there. I mean, I think Kubrick knew about these symbols and alchemical allegories that are going around in society. He could sniff it and he could put it in there, that this is where our whole societal apparatus is going to work towards in the coming future. So that is how I'm going to put it in there. Or maybe it's about, he could understand that's it is a fertility ritual. I think it's something deeper than just, male psyche or misogyny or something like that. It's even that. Jack the Ripper, he talks about he why did he create nuclear bombs? He said, I did this attack because I discovered some sort of weakness in me during the act of love. It's like,
That's
I
right.
mean, we're talking about a schism between the male and female. This is what and he's also a ripper, so he's like pulling things apart,
Right.
so
Right.
there's that element of
It
that
kills
Jordan talked about.
prostitutes, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I
uh,
mean, gosh, this is no pun intended. This is remarkably fertile. The other things that I was thinking about as you were talking is like, and it's I've never really known how to slot it, but it's making a lot more sense now in light of this conversation. Is that Buzz when he takes his first steps on the moon? It's he has like a very paradoxical expression. He goes, he says something to the effect of magnificent desolation, like really hinting at the barrenness of it all. And so that's I think that's going to filter into this fertility ritual that we're talking about. Simultaneously, and thinking about the eco aspect of it all, the idea of Gaia, the idea of a unified spirit of Earth, or like the Mother Nature is like calling out for us to do this or that. That's really given the juice through the Green Day. Through the Earth Day. I'm sorry, not the Green Day, but the Earth Day uh, production that goes on. So I wonder. I don't have a great understanding of the concept of Gaia. Perhaps Jordan could speak more to it as well. But I think that's going to be something I'm going to have to drill down on in connection to this fertility ritual. I've been thinking about it all in terms of like a cosmic consciousness, but it really has this aspect that does, like you say, spread out throughout the entire Earth. So this idea is really given juice through these missions. We have a lot of slides still to cover. We still haven't really finished the Fraser material. There's one more slide on the Fraser material for today. So we should make some progress, unless Jordan, you want to weigh in on something very quickly.
No, I think we can keep moving along, and the whole Gaia Earth theme is just going to continue. So,
Yeah, I'm not saying more on it. I could say a lot more, but
mhm.
we're gonna save it for next time. Yes, Ostic.
just one synchronicity in this chapter when I was reading it. It talks about how in Transylvania or somewhere that these Europeans had these customs of thinking about corn to be the spirit of the dead or something. It's like
Right.
they had, and when they'll harvest corn, they will not allow children to go in, and they'll say that there's something in the maize, MAIZE. Then I thought about, okay, is
Yes.
in the
Yes.
shining maze. The old one is sitting there. The talk, and then in the end, Jack is sitting there. So I was thinking about the maze and the MAIZE. It would be something about, there's something dead there that is a representation of, we have harvested all our corn. Now there's a dead man sitting in the field. So children should not go into the maize field. So that was interesting. I thought I might bring it up.
Yeah, that is an interesting synchronicity.
That's
All right.
cool.
Next slide, Jordan. Okay, so I'm going to be relatively brief about this, and I in chapter 5 it's called the battle of summer and winter. And the we have this scenario where death is externalized and carried and ignited and thrown into these streams and whatnot, and then he's revivified as a tree or something of that nature. But oftentimes in these different rites and rituals, they would have actual battles between uh, decaying vegetative figures and renewed ones, ultimately corresponding to winter and summer, and that they would actually make them fight and battle. Now, the outcome was always assured. The summer king was always going to win, but people felt like they had to engage in these ritual contests in order to get the in order to harmonize with the cycle and get the outcomes that are so desired. And obviously the winter figure is stripped and beaten and driven away when he loses in order to bring about the vegetative boons. Here's one example. Like in Celtic lore, we have the Holly King and the Oak King who are engaged in perpetual battle. Talking about this stuff in a way, it kind of reminds me of the battle of the Day King and Night King, and it's always sunny in Philadelphia. But this is one particular example of the contest between these opposing forces. And with that,
Oh,
I think we've largely covered the Fraser material for today. So we can finally get into the JFK schizo stuff. But I'll let you add something here, Ostic.
no, no, I don't have anything to add. I thought you might able to be saying something. It's a whole culmination of what we have been studying all this while. The
Yeah,
May festivals and everything. This is a refresher of what we've been going on. So I'm pretty satisfied with the coverage.
yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get into some JFK stuff. So I mentioned this at the outset. This is the program that Walter Cronkite interrupted with the announcement that JFK had been struck, perhaps mortally wounded in Dallas in the motorcade. And it's this episode of As the World Turns. And back then, all the productions were done live. So the actors that were part of this production of As the World Turns didn't even really know what was going on. They didn't know that Kennedy had been assassinated until they got off stage. So they just kept going and doing their job. And you see that this is a woman named Helen Wagner, which we'll get, and she plays the role. Oh, I forget the name of the role, but and this is Santos Ortega, and they're talking about Thanksgiving and inviting Uncle Bob or something like that. We'll get into who they are later. And this is the CBS News Bulletin. Jordan had some interesting insights that I'll let her share about the imagery that's associated with the CBS Bulletin. And immediately after Cronkite does the first announcement, it goes into this very hypnotic Nescafe commercial. A lot of people within conspiracy culture have talked about this commercial. It talks about, to get a great cup of coffee, you need more than an instant. You need this new minute brew, and it's got the pendulum swinging back and forth, and then it's double. The an actor's hand comes in and mirrors the pendulum swinging. He does it with a spoon, and then there's this very unsettling man who takes a deep drink of coffee, and then Cronkite then comes back again. He's like, "Yeah, we can confirm that Kennedy's dead." Um, there are lots of things to say about this. One of the things that really jumped out at me when thinking about this, you have you have this hypnotic imagery. I have no idea. Maybe this Nescafe commercial was running for months and months and months before its placement within As the World Turns. But or maybe this is the first time. I did not look into that. Regardless, you have a company here openly using occult hypnotic techniques in order to get people to buy their coffee. But even then, the way that it functions, when Walter Cronkite is bursting into the scene and out of the scene, telling you this stuff about JFK, in a way, it reminds me. I've gone to a couple hypnotist shows in my life. I've never been able to be hypnotized this way, but I've seen some people do it. It's actually remarkably effective. They can get you to do anything you want. You're gonna, when you hear the sound of my voice or I snap my fingers, et cetera, et cetera. You can see that this sort of technique, rightly or wrongly, whether or not someone orchestrated it or not, was going to allow the majority of the public who was witnessing or hearing about the Kennedy assassination for the first time to just automatically accept whatever the hypnotist is communicating, which I guess in this role would be Walter Cronkite. And what I find so interesting about this is that we have hypnotism themes paired with coffee. Okay. Coffee is it's one of the few substances that we have that really wakes you up. I'm on, in terms of, and you see this over and over again in sort of alchemical programming or alchemical movies and TV shows, especially I think about Twin Peaks. The detective is always drinking coffee because you have to get to a higher state of consciousness in order to figure out the caper, right? And so it almost seems to be this bifurcated choice in my mind, intentional or not. It's almost like a red pill, blue pill moment. Are you going to accept the blue pill at whatever Cronkite and others are going to be communicating to you through mass media? Or are you going to drink your coffee, sober up, and realize what's going on here? I find it interesting that the coffee that they are selling is not instant coffee, it's minute coffee. It takes longer. And so this gets into a theory that we've talked about, is whether or not these mistakes, this occult symbolism that is put into all the different conspiracy theory, is for a small set of people actually a good thing. It's actually for the three of us that are here who can see it and understand it. It is a method for us to come out of the cave, to be extracted, that we are actually in some way being helped. I mean, it's not going to be instantaneous, but it's going to take some time. It's almost like we're in like matrix training programs before like we're actually ready to do the actual combat. And for the vast majority of other people, they're going to choose to be hypnotized. So those were some of the first thoughts that I had from viewing this sequence of events. Jordan watched it with me. I'm sure she has lots to share, and Osik too.
I think we need to look into the Celtic mythology of Ness, Ness.
Interesting. I don't know anything about this. What do you know?
It just dawned on me, so I started Googling. I haven't fully integrated it, but she is sort of a Irish sort of goddess figure. I don't know that they would call her a goddess, but the main story around her is about conceiving a king.
Really?
Really. That's what Wikipedia is telling me. So let's just
I
maybe bookmark that.
I had not I had not considered that at all. Like looking into
Yeah.
the etymology of Nescafe. That's
I
interesting.
Yeah, I was just thinking Nest. There has to be what is that? Because cafe obviously is kind of the coffee portion of the brand name. I just assumed there had to be something encoded in there. So
I like that.
that's interesting to me. And maybe there's other Nesses. That's the first one I could from the moment I had the idea to investigate it to right now. That's what I found.
Do you want to say something about the subliminal programming with the bulletin?
Sure, when I saw this, we've tried to avoid conspiracy lands for almost a year now.
It's gets really difficult.
It's everywhere. When I saw this, to me, it looked like a bullet going into a tower and the
Yeah.
tower falling.
Yeah.
So it's a tower falling moment, and the bullet is the catalyst. I think it's both metaphorical and literal.
Yeah.
You could also put this onto Camelot as the tower, and the bullet that hit JFK
Yep.
toppled the Tower of Camelot. Of course, we have the Tower of Babylon, myths, um, all sorts of things, but clearly you have potentially 2 towers in here
Yep. Yep.
falling.
I see it. I see it. I'm mad at myself that you saw it before me.
Yeah, this is one of those that's just very visual. It's when it clicks, it clicks. It's not like there's a lot to decode there. Luke, you pointed out, and I'm sure others have as well, CBS is C bullshit, C BS, C BS news, C bullshit news. That's what we're
Yeah.
watching. And
And
their
it's
logo is the eye, the
right. So it's like
all-seeing eye.
yeah. So you just spell it out, the hieroglyphic
I
ICBS.
see. Yep, it's right in front of your face. I was floored when we were watching this, and they're clearly evoking hypnotism in a commercial. I sort of knew they used to do stuff like that all of the time. Obviously, we're being so hyper programmed via social media feeds. That's a whole nother level. But it was interesting how open it was and very weird to me. Very weird that you'd even continue to play a TV show in the middle of this when I don't know, like I could play both sides and rationalize it, but it seems weird. The
There's just enough that you can be like, "Oh, look, you're reading too much into this." But I mean, clearly there's clearly an ethical problem with having pendulums swinging in front of coffee or whatever.
Yeah, an isolation of everything, and then you sandwich it with the news coverage of the killing of the king, the
Mhm.
assassination.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. I'm sure too there's more things in here that
Oh,
I have not
we're
caught.
gonna go deeper. I think the next 4 or 5 slides are all about this.
Okay.
So, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Osik, do you wanna say something before we go to the next one?
Pretty interesting observation. I never thought about the bulletin thing as being connected to a falling tower, and now
Yeah.
I cannot unsee it. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, last few episodes we talked about how the resting places of both these events, the memorials, they seem to be inverses of each other, and then they might be connected in some way, but and since it's the Apollo thing, okay, whatever. So now it's like, did they know they were going to do this back in 63? That's pretty insane. Like, um,
Well, this gets into the larger conversation why kept bringing the Gilmore Girls thing into this. It's like when I got and we there's still a lot more that I want to talk about with this episode and it and the media that is attached to it. But when I started digging into this, I was like, oh, I've tried so hard to get away from just being like, see, it's all big conspiracy. Like it's completely possible that the reality is anticipating and rendering itself in such a way to lead us down that rabbit hole. And we'll get into it when I talk about some of the things that happened with my viewing of Gilmore Girls, because I was almost just like going to collapse all this archetypal psycho history and to be like, nope, it's just secret societies having taken the piss out of us. And then I had my own experiences and I was like, no, okay, secret societies are not going to explain it all. So we'll get to that in a minute, but I wanted to go deeper into some of the symbolism, and then we'll contemplate whether or not that is a
I
viable
also think,
explanation.
just one thing. I also thought about that idea that you floated a while ago, that this might be a way to take lure us out of the cave. In that sense, this Nescafe commercial, because it's so explicit and it's so, it would ring fire alarms in the minds of anyone who would watch it. Like, it might get, it could also be some way to signal to, I mean, it might not be that everyone has coordinated and everyone would know about it. So it might have happened, and then they show this some sort of a weird fake thing, or like it's a very blatant symbol of hypnotism. So the people in the know would know about, okay, some agent there. Oh, okay, it's a false flag. I did not worry. I know who,
Yeah,
something like that.
that's true too.
It could be,
That's true too.
it's like the communication, because it's happening. It's like an instant communication to everyone,
Mhm.
and I also thought about them continuing to air this episode. It's like an unresolved grief. It's like you're being hit on the head and you do not know who hit you, and then you're thinking about it, and the world's still going on as if nothing had happened in that moment. It's like, it's very disorienting the first time you see it. It's like you're watching TV, nothing new is happening. Suddenly, oh, what, and then everything is going as normal. It's like, it has a effect on, maybe it primes you or something. Hypnotists,
Mhm.
I mean, they're playing a hypnotism commercial. They might know about few tricks. Giving them too much credit,
Well,
maybe.
you know what's
Uh,
funny? Late last night, I was like on Twitter or Instagram, and someone was like talking about just like how psychedelic and unreal America is, or how like unreal the media is, and they were showing a clip of Maduro being captured, right? Which is, this is sensational. It's not as I don't think it's as big as JFK being assassinated, but still, like I can't. I think when I was a little boy, they did maybe they did something kind of similar with Manuel Noriega, but it's been a long time since we've just gone and taken a head of state like that. And uh, CNN was covering it, and they were doing wall to wall coverage, and like, we need to get some commercial sponsors in, and then it's like an Applebee's commercial, like on half the screen with the Maduro coverage, and I'm like, okay, like, is there deep symbolism here with like the Applebee's commercial? I'm like, no, this is silly, but now I'm thinking about, well, the apple, the knowledge, like, oh, when does it end?
Mhm.
Uh, yeah. But presumably, if this is like a trade secret or protocol or something that the universe orchestrates, like it makes me want to like go back to like 9/11 tapes and like what were like Fox News and CNN and CBS, like, or maybe just CBS, what were they airing when they found out that the first tower got hit and then they went to commercial or whatever? Are we gonna find something like this hypnotic Nescafe commercial?
Mhm. It's
You know, back then
unhinged.
back then they had like three channels. When 9/11 happened, there were hundreds of channels. So it makes it harder to make the case that that there was a uniform type of programming that was going on.
the event
But
is stronger. I mean, with the Kennedy thing, they did not have a footage of that happening, but
yeah.
with the 9/11, they had footage right away, and then it was very spectacular. So they
Oh
do not
yeah,
need
yeah.
maybe those subliminal techniques to, you know.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Everybody yeah. That's great. That's a great point. Okay, let's go to the
Can I
let's keep oh yeah.
There's just one more message encoded in the CBS News bulletin. It's showing you that the news, the information is the weapon being used to cause destruction.
Yeah. Yep. It's all going on in the mind. It's all going on in the mind. Consciousness is primary. Okay, so I'll talk about this real quickly. This is not the first time that Kennedy was associated with coffee. When he was doing his Senate run in the early 50s, the whole family got together and did these coffee and tea meet and greets and even did like local access and national television programs, spotlights, where uh, I guess they called it Coffee with the Kennedys or Coffee with Kennedy. And people from the audience would ask questions and get to know the candidate. It smoothed and it humanized him. But I do want to say that at least in this time in the 50s and 60s, there was a very strong symbolic tether between Kennedy and coffee. So this Nescafe is not the first time that we see coffee associated with JFK. It had been other people would do this after JFK, but he was one of the first ones to bring it into the television medium and portray himself as drinking the coffee with you. He knows, he cares, he's alert, he gets it. He's charismatic, he's got youthful vigor, he's caffeinated, he's ready to make it happen. And perhaps this connects to the solar energy aspect that we've talked to. I'm probably should look into that the what the sun and coffee have in connection and the growing of the coffee bean. So and of course that's going to get back into our fertility rituals and our vegetative spirit as well. It's not an overdetermined symbol with Kennedy in the sense that it's not like something that he's if you go and you do like Kennedy coffee searches or whatever, you're not gonna find like what we've found, at least so far in my experience, like what we have with say the Christic imagery or the Ulyssian imagery or the King Arthur imagery. It's a more of a secondary one. It's in the background, but it's there. So I don't have much more to say about it than that. Just bringing your attention that the Nescafe commercial is not the only episode of coffee associated with Kennedy.
Since we're talking about coffee, I you already connected him to Twin Peaks, and then he always drinks coffee all the time. But one of the prominent images that is associated with Dale Cooper is actually of him smashing his head into the mirror and him having a gash on
Yeah.
his head, and that's a head
Yes.
wound. That
Yes, it is.
also pointed me to Kennedy thing, and then I never thought about it, but Jack gets a head wound when he's hit on the head. He's clubbed on the head by Wendy, and he gets a head wound,
That's right.
and it's
That's
like
right.
I think we already know about the Kennedy connection with the head wound with that writer, that brilliant writer, which
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about that. The Kennedy name, the etymology of it, I believe it means something like ugly head, or mortal head wound in some way. So, next slide, Jordan, if you don't mind. Okay, so we're going to get into some of the more granular aspects of this television show that Walter Cronkite interrupted. There's so much to say about this. If you were to ask, I don't. You guys are much younger, so I don't know if you even know who Walter Cronkite is. I think you do as the result of the things that we have studied here. But just taking a step back, if you were to ask anyone, say any boomer and most Gen Xers, I guess I'm a little bit of an unusual Gen Xer because I'm an info junkie and have kind of always been one. But if you were to ask them, what events would you associate Walter Cronkite with? Well, it would be the Kennedy assassination and it would be the Apollo missions. Far and away, number one, number two. He also covered Watergate and a variety of other issues throughout his, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years that were on the air. But he was the anchor. He was like the literal anchor that bridged these two narratives together: the death of Camelot and the landing of the moon. And the reason why they are so um, driven into the human mind is the type of emotion that Cronkite showed when these events happen. When he comes in and comes on the air and actually have images of the newsroom during As the World Turns, and he announces the death, he's choking back tears. And when we land on the moon and throughout the entire excursion or whatever, he is giddy like a schoolboy. And what's so interesting about all of this is that both of these events are connected with globe imagery. So As the World Turns has this like paper mache model of the world turning, and it's a fake globe. And then supposedly through the Apollo missions, we get our first real pictures of Earth from outer space with the Earthrise photo in Apollo 8 and the blue marble with Apollo 17. So they're bookended and they're connected. And he grounds these events together. It is also very interesting that As the World Turns has a solar element to it, right? It is illuminated by the sun. You see the model of the Earth is rotating and being lit up by the sun, but then it's interrupted. The solar king, that is Kennedy, is killed and the world stops, right? It's lost its source of light. And in that way, the model of the Earth is fractured and broken. And we can see, like we talked about last time, when we have that regicide event, when we have the center of the universe totally destroyed, we see that the wasteland creeps in. And that's how we can talk about the other assassinations that happened in the 60s, Vietnam, unrest, Woodstock, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then ultimately there's this restoration when the solar king that is Apollo, and there are reasons to think that Apollo is a solar king because he's the king of the muses. He merges with the identity of Helios, who is the sun god or lord of the Romans, right? So we have these two solar figures, one that's dethroned and one that's restored, and we get a new image of the Earth via the restored solar king that is Apollo. So, and like I said, both these events are anchored by JFK. We've talked about the ICBS thing. That was wonderful. I want to talk a little bit more about the As the World Turns episode. So throughout the As the World Turns episode, I was able to watch it. The main actress, Helen Wagner, the whole they're throughout the thing, they're drinking coffee. So it's another drink your coffee, right? Um, the name Helen is a solar name. Helen obviously connects to Helen of Troy, but Helen of Troy's name comes from Helios, the sun god, which I think is so fascinating since we're talking about As the World Turns being interrupted by the death of a solar figure, right? Not to mention her last name is Wagner. Wagner means wagon maker. So we have, or wagon rider or something like that, right? So we have a Helios connection and a wagon, and that gets us back to the Kennedy funeral, which we've looked at before, where it kind of looks like Apollo, the solar figure, and his is there in his covered wagon being drawn by the white and gray horses. So I thought that was very interesting that the main figure, as part of the As the World Turns um, episode, is associated etymologically through, and you have to do some associative mapping here, the chariot of the sun god. Okay. Some other things I want to talk about here. Through one of the commercials that happens during As the World Turns is for Frisky's dog food, Frisky's puppy food. And this kind of gets into like a QAnon blurring area. It starts off, they're like, oh, Frisky's puppy food. It's great for young pups. Da 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 da. And it has a bunch of like puppy golden retrievers, right? Which probably have their own symbolism, which I've not really decoded. And then they go, but it's also great for older dogs, right? And then they show a basset hound who goes and eats the Frisky food. And he's like, oh, this older dog loves his magic sauce cubes. Now, we've talked about magic and cubes and simulation, but the basset hound is one of those dogs that is most associated with detectives. In some renderings of Sherlock Holmes, he has a basset hound. Columbo has a basset hound. This basset hound, because of their good sense of smell, they're how close they are to the ground, they're particularly good trackers, and that's why they make a good detective. So, and the reason why I bring this out is that through the QAnon information, they are very repetitive about dog comms. It is one of the way, like like Ostick was talking about how, like, for those in the know, the pendulum and the coffee might be a signal about what's really going on here. I think similarly, these dog commercials could, I'm not saying they could be like that, given the emphasis. And I never in a million years would have thought that people are giving secret messages through dogs, but that a lot of that communication has been borne out And because of the Maduro arrest, I think it's given some juice again. I think we can maybe make the case that there were perhaps dog comms buried in this show to begin with. Okay, that's all. I'm not going to go deeper into that. But of course, whenever I see detective things, it's imploring us wake up, smell the coffee, be a detective. One of the other interesting things is that there is a Niagara a spray starch commercial that is in the As the World Turns episode. And the reason why that's going to be important, we're going to look at it in a second. I watched the entire thing. There is an advertisement for that show, I've Come to Kill a King, or Here I Am to Kill a King, the Route 66 show. And there are probably there's probably like 6 or 7 very uncanny synchronicities that parallel the Kennedy assassination, except it doesn't take place in Dallas, though Dallas is mentioned in the episode. It takes place at Niagara Falls. I find it very interesting that there's an advertisement in As the World Turns that gets interrupted by the Kennedy assassination that has a reference to Niagara, and it also has an advertisement for a king kill situation at Niagara Falls. So
This
that's what
ties in
yeah, yeah.
to Twin Peaks as well because it takes place they don't name it that. I forget what they call it, but it's filmed in Snoqualmie Falls.
Yes.
And the opening scene is the waterfall with the hotel, Snoqualmie
It's so
Falls.
beautiful.
It's so beautiful there, yeah.
Yeah. It's so beautiful.
Marilyn Monroe starred in a movie called Niagara, and
Did she
it was,
really?
yeah, it was a. I'm not sure about it, but it's supposed to be about some fertility. I'll look into it. Just a bookmark. You continue.
Mm. Well, I'm done here, but I mean, I've said a lot to get through all these different images. These were some of the things that I picked up on. Did Osik, did you have I know you're busy. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it yourself or the Route 66 episode. And for anyone who's interested, they're all on YouTube. This is not hard to find information. So the particular episode that was advertised, or the subsequent one, I should say, because there is some debate about what episode was going to be on November 22nd. Is called I've come here I am to kill a king or something like that, and it was I guess generally agreed upon to be broadcast on November 29th, and then they moved it to the spring or March of 1964 because really the subject was too sensitive.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, with all of this information, I can sense all these patterns, and I really appreciate it. I think it's pretty wonderful. But also, just one point about Walter Cronkite. I think Walter Cronkite gets one mention in Kubrick's filmography, and that's in Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
That's the turning point of the film, and he talks about it's literally halfway. I think literally the actual halfway of the movie where Joker is sent on a journey through the heart of Vietnam to unite, and that's him says now the Charlie has cut the country in half, and even Cronkite had said that the war is now unwinnable. So
Yes,
it's about
that's probably one of his top 3 moments. That's probably the third most famous, I think.
so yeah. I mean, Kubrick he already had brought I think Kennedy assassination in that movie, so him bringing Cronkite in that reference could probably strengthen that fact that Cronkite has something to do with everything.
It does
Uh,
kind of provide a bridge between the assassination, the wasteland, and the rejuvenation.
yeah. Also,
Yeah.
Cronkite was in the Epstein Epstein files. I looked them.
Yeah,
That was
that
interesting.
came out recently. Yeah.
So I looked at what people I might know. So Walter Cronkite was one of them. That was
Stephen
he
Hawking.
was yeah Stephen Hawking. That's pretty ludicrous. That one is like so weird that it's almost laughable. Like what is he
It
doing?
is laughable. I mean, this is a whole thing, right? Like how do how do we know how do we know any of this Epstein stuff is real?
Some of it seems real, but okay, we'll
Yeah.
talk about it later.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Anyhow,
um,
what even is real? Who knows? So, should we move to the next slide? Okay. All right. So here's the episode. I'm Here to Kill a King, which, wouldn't you know, Ostick, it has a Kubrick reference. Can you? I've included the images here on the slide, but here are some of the uncanny synchronicities between the JFK assassination and the I'm Here to Kill a King episode that is um, potentially advertised in the As the World Turns. There's some dispute about what was going to be aired on November 22nd and November 29th, but it's immediately following it. And there is, there they have I'll try to recount what the story is about. So in the story, that takes place at Niagara Falls, you have this like sheik and this like Saudi or Middle Eastern general who is working with a hired hitman to execute and assassinate the leader of his country when he comes to America. The assassination is going to be on American soldier. The situation gets a little scrambled because one of the leads from Route 66 is the doppelganger of the hitman. And there's a case of mistaken identity where he is made aware of the plans and gets roped into the situation. There is through the State Department, it is revealed to the Saudi king that there is an assassination attempt, and to test the loyalty of the general to make sure that he's not part of it, they swap clothes, and ultimately what ends up happening is the general gets assassinated by the hitman who has the doppelganger. Okay. Now, why is this so interesting? They make sure that the hitman makes sure to shoot the king in the head. Okay, so that's one of the things. It's going to be the mortal head wound, right? The doppelganger thing, the fact that there are twins in this speaks to all the different doppelgangers that are involved in the JFK assassination. There's the talk about JD Tippett being the doppelganger of JFK, but also there was some talk about like two Oswalds and different shooters and things like that. The hitman, when he meets his doppelganger, the star of Route 66, he asks him, he's like, is it possible that we are long lost twins and brothers and whatnot? And the hitman says, no, it's not. My father's name was Lee. So the assassin for JFK is named Lee, and then the assassin in the show is the son of Lee, right? So that's very interesting. And he kills him with a high-powered sniper rifle, just like Lee Harvey Oswald kills JFK in the story, and he does it very, very haphazardly. He does it from a grassy knoll in the show, and that we're told that there were shots from a grassy knoll in Dallas that day. Also, there is the Kennedy-esque Zapruder film motorcade that the Sheik is taken around in, and yeah, I think that generally sort of covers it. Okay, like that's a lot. There's more I could get into, but everyone should watch it. The thing that did you spot the Kubrick connection? It's not a strong one. It's not one that I would say, oh, okay, this has Kubrick fingerprints on it, but it's interesting that he is connected through a collaborator to this I'm Here to Kill a King and possibly a lot of others. You can see there that the
Lolita.
music, yes, there you go. The music for I'm Here to Kill a King was done by Nelson Riddle. Well, who's Nelson Riddle? By the way, I love the fact that his name is Riddle, right? It's like that's what we're looking at. And Nelson Riddle does the music for Lolita, and Lolita is associated with the Epstein files because everybody flew on the Lolita Express, right? Nelson Riddle, uh, most famously, if you're familiar with Lolita, does the Ya Ya song, right? Ya Ya, na, 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 yeah, whatever, right? Like that's a Nelson Riddle song, and he also does the music for I'm Here to Kill a King. The music is great, by the way. And I looked into it. You can see the writers and the producers. This was early on in their careers. They did a bunch of other things. I think one of the writers did like Towering Inferno, which some people think is like foreshadowing 9/11. And when you look at all these different things, it's hard to resist the notion that there wasn't foreknowledge. But I'll bring in the whole Gilmore Girls thing. I I was doing a bunch of stuff around the house, and we were watching, and I had convinced myself that this had to be like conspiracy theory, right? And we're watching Gilmore Girls, and like 6 to 7 things that I had done that day show up in the episode, and it's very strange and odd and not really fitting. And I mean, what am do I think some secret side societies went and did that, or like knew I would be born and have this day 3 days ago and like try to like coordinate something? It's too that's no, I don't think that. I think it's more probable that there's a larger spiritual force that is arranging things, either in time, outside of time, re-rendering it or whatever. And I think it's possible that um, this event is being expressed through the consciousness of individuals in a decentralized way. Why? You know, that's what we're trying to get at. But I think it's possible that all these individuals are not coordinated except through the fact that they participate in the consciousness that coordinates everything in the reality. I because I don't know how to explain why I'm showing up at a Gilmore Girls episode. It's like 2 or 3 days
It
in a row now.
could, like, what were
It's
the synchronicities?
mm,
Were they too strong? It could be that you are a homely
Yeah,
person, so
I'll tell you about some of them. I'll tell you about some of them. For instance, I was I had to clean out this cupboard, right? And in this cupboard, I had all this extra cinnamon, okay? And I dumped out these massive things of cinnamon into the trash, okay? And I had made the slide earlier in the day about the covered wagon and Helios and whatnot. And so we flip on Gilmore Girls, for instance, and lo and behold, the episode is called Cinnamon's Wake, a reference to Finnegan's Wake, right? And it's about the death of a cat, and the cat is paraded all over town in a covered wagon, not unlike the covered wagon that we've been talking about with this Kennedy assassination stuff. And that's just one particular instance of this, but it went on and on and on and on. And that's just one set of synchronicities that happen with this within this particular episode. So
I'll vouch for you.
yeah,
It
I
was
mean,
pretty unhinged, and some of it was very personal in ways
yes,
that were very strange. This has happened with other movies and shows. The Good Place, we had this
yeah,
happen to both of us quite a bit, but it was more spread out. This was, we turned it on, and within 20 minutes, there were like 20 different things
yeah,
that were hyper specific to the prior 24 hours and things that weren't typical daily, weekly
no,
things for you.
no,
You know, it would be one thing if it was lining up with things that just are part of
that
your
every
routine.
right or that everyone does.
It was not that. It was
No,
like, yeah, I do think the cinnamon is very illustrative. That morning, you were like,
yeah, I lost my shit about it.
I wasn't even thinking about that, but I was just thinking like a huge tub of cinnamon, and you were just in your head like, "Why do I even have this?" And
Yeah.
then the cat's name is Cinnamon. He's in a chariot. The cat dies. Like, it was ridiculous.
And there was like 5 minutes left in the episode, and I don't wanna get
Oh,
into
the
it.
whole time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The
The
whole
whole
time Luke was saying, "There's gonna be a JFK reference."
right, like, so I don't wanna disclose the particulars of it because these are people that I see in my daily life, but I there was like 5 minutes left in the episode. I throughout the episode, I was like, there will be a JFK reference in this episode because of it was part of my day and all these other things that gotten woven into it from earlier in the day. And there was like 5 minutes left. I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if the JFK reference is gonna come up." And it did. In a very personal way, in a very I don't wanna name the person that it references. If you go and watch the episode, you might be able to figure it out. But I had a personal contact with someone in the episode about JFK. And so I was like, what it was one of those moments where, you definitely feel like you're in the Truman Show. And like I said,
Yeah.
this happened once before. We watched The Good Place, and it started my life in the show. I cannot be saying these things on air. I look insane, but they started merging, and I think really it's like kind of a tell about the collective dream that we're in, or perhaps really being in the afterlife, and that the simulation can rewrite the reality for
Mhm.
individuals that are impacting the collective consciousness. So,
The way
you
I
know,
see it is there's
yeah,
multiple we all personally project into the dreamscape and how all of our projections are intersecting kind of collectively shapes things. But it was pretty ridiculous how much in one episode all at once. It's happened to us before with other things, but I think this was like the most aggressive. Oh, in
Yeah.
case you didn't
Yeah.
believe it, here's
Yeah.
another one. Here's another
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Here's another one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bizarre phenomenon. So
Yeah,
yeah.
brings back David Lynch and the David Bowie guy. He talks about we live inside
Yeah,
a
we live
dream.
inside a
But
dream.
who's the dreamer? Who is the dreamer? It's like, but considering your situation, like if it is all a dream and you are seeing your life being reflected inside the dream, it could be that since this is the reason that our world is so different and varied, maybe. So it's like this world would be able to accommodate the dreams of so many people, like whatever may happen. So like whatever we're doing, it might resonate to someone else who's sitting on some other part of the country who see this video and see like, oh wow, I was thinking about this, and why are they talking about this particular subject? So it's like this world might be filled with so many beautiful things. Like it's like there's intention behind it, and there's intention is that it has been created for you. In that sense, it's curated for you, but it's not that everything is for you. Whatever you see is for you. Are you do you resonate with that? I'm thinking about like it's a personal dream for everyone. So any if someone is tapped into their lived reality, they might be able to catch these synchronicities in their daily lives in that way. And it's not just about the show. They might have these conversations with their friends, or like you talked about in your past, you talked about you stopped receiving those greetings about Luke, I'm your father
Yeah.
after the
Yeah.
event. And these it's not that you are the one who is expressing it. These things might be happening to people, but they're simply unaware of it. They're simply tuned out. They're simply too busy. They're thinking linearly. They have some goals, or maybe or pressures in their life they're not able to tap into, or sit back and think what just happened. So it's, I think, reality might be conforming to us. It's just that we would need our ability to see it. And since you're talking about it in such a profound way, I'm starting to self reflect in that sense that I may not, I may have left a lot of effort to be desired to in in integrating myself with my environment, and not really believing in, okay, this might be showing up for me, this might be a sign for me. I mean, we've been talking about JFK being shown signs of his future or some premonitions, but
Yeah.
you know we don't people don't usually do that. So now talking about you guys, and listening to your experiences, and they are pretty concrete by the looks of it, and by how they sound. So I'm starting to have this kind of more acceptance towards these ideas now, I think. And just
These are not
personal thing
these are
that
not yeah, these are not ideas that I ever sought out. I'm running out of explanations for the phenomenon that I'm seeing. That, or I have to deny that they're happening, which is impossible. So, but this has been something I'm experiencing really since I woke up, but very much since about 2019. But they really started about 10 years ago. Stuff like this would happen, a couple times a year prior to me like waking up, but it was so episodic. You figured that chance could explain some of it, but when it's every day of your life, I can't do that anymore. So I either have to try to scrutinize it and come up with a theory and look potentially insane, or deny it. And I'm not going to deny it. Okay. Um, we got a lot more to talk about here. So one of the things that, as I was, and we don't really necessarily have to go too deep into this, but I was having a conversation. We talked about methodology for using the AI and whatnot. I I was so convinced that because of all the synchronicities that were happening with the As the World Turns episode and the commercials and the Route 66 program, that this was undeniable that there wasn't some sort of scripting that was going on here. And so I tried to list out all the different agendas that could be going on with revelation of the method. Why is this being shown to us? And and I think this is from my experience with Jim, and I asked it to kind of rank it, and could you rate whether or not these synchronicities are demonstrating this particular motive or agenda that's going on with revelation of the method. um and it was kind of an interesting exercise. I don't necessarily agree with this, but um the one that seems to be the strongest is this cultural autopilot that's distributed intentionality. That's just an emergent part of the psychic systems that we're in. But other ones I came up with were the normalization and cognitive softening, fragmented disclosure, plausible deniability, myth making, institutional arrogance. Like you're just like, we have so much power, we can just do this, and what are you going to do to stop it? Psychic energy capture, loosh harvesting, um, control mechanism inducing psychosis, people feeling guilty for participating in it, and there's like moral leakage, or this or this perennial famous thesis that it's part of like karmic or metaphysical law that they have to tell us. And this was what the AI ranked it. I'll go up and down the spectrum on this, but I do still think I'm still coming back around to this cultural autopilot, though there was a little fly in the ointment. uh, I don't want to go too deep into it because I'm not trying to create any enemies here. But Jordan and I were watching some interviews for people who were involved in the Kennedy assassination, or someone who was involved in the Kennedy assassination, and it was not a convincing performance. Let's just say. So I'm still trying to iron all that out. I don't want to. I'm not trying. I don't want to make any. I'm not. I don't want to call anybody out here, but I'm still wrestling with the idea that there could be crisis actors and people like that planted into these
This
operations.
this one's bad. This
It
one's
is.
bad. Like, reach out if you want a link.
Yeah.
If you don't wanna discuss it here, Luke, but I think the takeaway is, yes, obviously, no one's conspiring to re-render Gilmore Girls to
Yeah.
perfectly fit January 2nd, 2026 in Luke Johnson's life. Like, that kinda rules that out, right?
Ugh.
And then you're presented with a video that's clearly someone lying. I don't
Yeah.
know how else to put it.
Yeah.
Textbook duper's delight.
Yeah.
You wanna see an example of what it looks like when somebody goes on television and is playing a part. What really sold it for me as well is over the years, there's multiple interviews and the same lines are recycled
Yeah.
by multiple people
Yeah.
and one individual in particular. So
Yeah.
it's like clearly there's an agreed upon script. And I also recognize within myself, sometimes if there's a story I've said many times throughout my life, there are kind of particular tracks I get
Yeah.
comfortable with,
Yeah.
but it's it is very impossible for me to rationalize what I saw away.
Yeah.
So you have these
Ostic, we'll send it to you. We'll send it to you.
yeah, yeah. Um, and anyone who's like deeply obsessed with this topic has probably come across it at some point. Maybe not, maybe not. The attention to detail to maybe arrive there might be higher than the average truther, but we're presented with these conflicting data points that don't make it easy to have one tidy theory that just encapsulates everything. Because on the one hand, clearly we're not being rewritten into these TV shows on purpose by people who wrote it 25 years ago. On the other hand, clearly there's some people who know that they are sharing stories and not just sharing stream of consciousness, personal reactions to lived events. And so I always go back to this blended model
Yep.
because I think that's the best I can do. And
That's the best
maybe
I can
that's
do too.
Maybe that's kind of a pussying out, if you will, because it doesn't neatly explain everything. But it's obvious to me humans are not controlling everything. And it's also obvious to me that sometimes humans are playing into it, playing it up. creating the circumstances for these archetypal stories to manifest through them and around them. I think the blended model makes the most sense.
Well, it's like what we've talked about with the Frazer rituals, that the individuals think they're bringing themselves in harmony with the rhythms of life.
You talk a lot about being in right relation. That's what that means. You're in right relation with nature, with the world, with your community, with your body. And by being in right relation, you are allowing, presumably, divinity to flow through you and materialize into the material plane. That's how I practice magic, if you wants to call it that. But, there's different flavors and levels of distortion that people are doing these things through.
Yep. We have 28 minutes, and I think we have like 6 slides left, but I can kind of speed run them. Um, so, but this is the one that I think Jordan's going to want to talk about the most because it involves astrology, and I kind of asked her to give us a download on this. Something I want to say real quickly about this, and then I'll hand it over to her. Is that uh, just another piece of evidence to consider that JFK is a solar figure, like we've been looking at for the past 6 weeks or so, is the timing of the Kennedy slaying. He's pretty much killed at high noon, when the sun is at its highest and when it doesn't really cast a shadow. And I think there's something really symbolic and poetic about all of that, right? That the energy would be released from his husk of a body, or whether it's his real body or a mannequin. It doesn't really matter. As we've seen, the ritual is taken very seriously, regardless. Something I don't know anything about astrology, but I use the AI, and Jordan, I think, is going to be skeptical about all of this, and perhaps rightly so. There have been so many people, because they were so, pun intended, triggered by the Kennedy assassination, that this produced legions of schizos long before I was ever born. And I think just really what the AI has done is scraped all these different astrological interpretations of whatever happened in Dealey Plaza. So one of the ones that's jumped out at me that was most interesting is that there's something known as the cusp of revelation, where I guess the sun goes from being in Scorpio to Sagittarius. And I guess this when the sun is I guess what it's telling me is this has to do with the degree of fate. The sun is at the final, most intense degree of the sign of death, secrets, which is Scorpio, and poised to enter Sagittarius. I find so the whole sun symbolism thing is very interesting to me. The other things are intriguing. I don't know if they're true. I'll let Jordan talk about it. One thing that led me to, I started thinking about Sagittarius, and this is going to really be developed further on out from here. But I'll preview it because I didn't have a chance to really go into all the Odyssey stuff that I wanted to cover, and horses and whatnot. But I think we have perhaps another reason to understand why the first man on the moon was named Armstrong. I had reasoned that Armstrong had something to do with perhaps the name of the cannon that is in the Jules Verne book that anticipates the moon landing. Right, they're shot out of the Armstrong cannon, or one of the cannons that is considered to be them being shot out of an Armstrong cannon. I thought that was a pretty good sync. It's making more sense to me now when you look into the etymology of strong arm. It has something to do with this individual that helps the king back up on his horse, a strong individual who has fallen off the horse and gets back on. So has everything to do with the king who has been thrown off the horse and who is being put back onto the horse, but also to string the bow, to shoot that arrow. And Sagittarius is an archer, and we've talked about Odysseus being blessed by the archer god that is Apollo. To string that bow and shoot it perfectly, to shoot that Saturn rocket, what do you need? A strong arm. You need Armstrong. You need arm strength in order to do the moonshot. And I'm like, oh, that's it. That's why he's the first man on the moon. It's the Armstrong name.
What do you think about the term moon puncher? What is a moon puncher?
I don't think I've ever heard that expression. Is that something in your culture or?
No, it's in Eyes Wide Shut. When those Yale grads they harass Bill Harford when he bumps into them. When they bump into him, they said, "Looks like we got a moon puncher up here." It's
Really?
a
That's what they say?
yeah. This says
Oh,
so.
I'll have to go back and check that out.
So I'm thinking about Armstrong in that sense. It's
That's
like
good.
he's a puncher. He's got an arm and
I
punching the
like that.
moon.
Well, in the
I mean, there are mostly homosexual references in there.
right, they are.
There's
They
a
are.
fudge tunnel and everything.
Right, right. It makes me think, the is it the George Millet's film, A Voyage to the Moon, that's based off of the Jules Verne story, does involve the vessel that they land on the moon. It hits the moon in the eye. So I wonder if that could be a translatable to this imagery as
Yeah.
well.
It's also the first movie, I think, the first kind of a movie,
It's like the
literally.
first sci-fi movie. First, I think
Yeah.
that's
Wow. That makes sense.
mm,
So like in 2001, he's already completed they're now beyond that first movie, the first sci-fi movie after that. So that's interesting.
it's great. Jordan, I'm curious. Do you have some astrological insights you want to share with the class?
I'm by no means an astrologer, but an astrology student. I think this summary is combining different systems, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And we could certainly revisit this in a column. I don't want to make this the astrology show because we really don't have enough time to delve deeply into the charts. His birth chart, for sure, has in the whole house system an eighth house stellium. I'm not sure if this eighth house stellium is also true of the event chart. I haven't done the casting in different ways. And some I see it in the seventh. It's possible it's in the eighth with a different house system. Um, but yeah, I mean, famously, you had astrologers predicting his death before it happened, um, which is interesting in and of
Oh yeah,
itself.
Gene Dixon did it.
Yes,
That's right. We were looking that up.
and that's a big part of the story of all of this. So whether or not you put your full faith and trust in an astrologer to predict things, it's part of the story. Astrology is part of the story. It, very famously, she made public predictions regarding it.
She
But
also
in
said
his
World War III was going to start in the 50s as well. So to to but she did get the assassination right.
right, and again, I don't want to derail. Like,
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
there's oh, no, no, you're good. It's just how these things play out and what astrology really is a whole can of worms, and you can understand what energies are going to be predicted without understanding how they're going to manifest in anything that's quote psychic. You're seeing into potentialities, which are always subject to change based off of choice points and the collective energy and the level of consciousness of the people involved, because we don't have to be victims to these things. And astrology can become a spell. We had the opening quote from Jackie talking about how Jack read all these stories and then basically manifested these stories in his own life. In many ways, astrology can play the same role if we give up our sovereignty to it, or if we basically place more importance than we have to on these archetypes, on these stories. So I think that's a very interesting like bookends how he opens this with basically the self-fulfilling prophecy where JFK was just so fascinated by these heroes' journeys, by these king stories, and then
Mhm.
he himself played it out. It seems like he knew what was happening or going to happen to some degree. And I'm not really, I can't say if he had, I don't know. Anyway, It's just very interesting. In his birth chart, he does have all of these planets for sure in the 8th house, which is associated with the house of death. So, there's a lot here. I know we personally, privately talked about what it means to transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius. We're students of alchemy here, so I always just encourage everyone to break things down into their simplest form. We have Scorpio, which is associated with the underworld, the subconscious. More contemporarily, it's associated with Pluto, but historically Mars. And that transition from that fixed, watery energy into mutable energy where we have Sagittarius. So Scorpio fixed meaning it's very like it maintains the peak energy of the season. Then we move into Sagittarius, and that's about the dispersal of the energy and the movement into a new type of energy. And the glyph for Sagittarius is the arrow. So we have the fall of Camelot, which kind of represents this foundational, strong emanation of an energy. The king falls, and now we have the dispersal, these arrows flying all over the place in into chaos, into
Yes.
different places. We don't have that uniformed, consolidated, centralized strength anymore. And so that's super interesting to me. And I believe Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So we have a shift from rulership from Pluto to a shift in Jupiter. And Jupiter is about spiritual expansion, and in a way, this ushered a big expansion for everyone who was impacted by this event in any way. I mean, it really was global. It continues to be a fixation of people on a truth-seeking path. It's very hard to avoid this event when you're trying to make sense of bigger world events and what's real and what's not real, what's illusion, and can we even know? Like, I think this event in particular really highlights almost this futility into knowing exactly what transpired in a very literal, concrete, highly detailed way.
Yeah, I mean, two things that you said that and I'll hand it back over to Ostic real quick. Just the it's just funny how I remember early on when we got this started, Ostic was like, I was like, we'll talk about JFK. Don't you worry. We'll get there eventually. But then the second was that um, I think it's worth dwelling on. I'm just going to make a mental note here with all the arrow imagery,
Mhm.
how early on in Kennedy's administration, his legacy is really defined by the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then
Right.
ultimately we see at least spiritually completed with the arrows to the moon. His
Mhm.
whole presidency is in a lot of ways defined by projectiles, and
Right.
I hadn't really, we talked a little bit about the Bay of Pigs in relation to possible Odyssean and Christic imagery, but the fact that it really involved projectiles is something that I need to integrate.
Mhm. Also, it seems that so again, we're talking about the blended cycle. It seems that the people who are intentionally encoding things are predominantly using what I would call more like a Crowley perspective on astrology. So that's something I've largely avoided looking at directly, but I think might provide insight into how these symbols are intentionally being concoded. And then, of course, we have the totally unintentional cosmic forces that are just poking through. And from that vantage point, you could probably use pretty much any divination, any astrology system that you want or are familiar with to see patterns, analyze those patterns. But I always urge people not to get too fixated on how, like we talked about curses earlier, same rules apply. Take what resonates, leave the rest. You are not a victim.
Ostic, what
Um,
say you?
I wanted to ask Jordan, like, does Scorpion represent death because you said it's ruled by Pluto?
It can for people. Yeah, I mean it's associated very heavily with the underworld, with the unseen. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Oh,
that's what I
that
thought. I mean, just one thing. I don't think it's valid, but it seems to fit here that Doctor Strangelove was a movie that he made before making 2001. And since we know 2001 is a Sagittarius, because he's Bowman, literally the guy is named
Yeah.
Bowman, and he's the Sagittarius figure. And Doctor Strangelove ends in death, literal all everything death, and then it's like
Mhm.
the underworld all over again. And they literally talk about we're gonna build a new underworld, we're gonna populate our underworld.
That's
It's
right.
a weird thing. So I was thinking about that. Maybe he anticipated this astrological significance and said that okay, these two things are happening now. This has happened, and this will be followed by a Sagittarian or an Apollonian event that so maybe I should make movies. So, but it's not very strong. But I was thinking about it as you were talking, so it seems to kind of fit. Um, Other thing I have is quite irrelevant, but like just maybe I should share it. So it's so whenever I hear the name Dave Bowman, so I think about it in terms of how would an Englishman or an American would pronounce it. Oh, okay, they're pronouncing it Dave Bowman, but I thought about okay, he's reading a myth of the thousand faces and all these mythologies combined. And Arthur C. Clarke, he lived in India, he lived in Sri Lanka, so he knows about what are the prevailing myths. And literally in South India there's a myth, like in South India there's a reincarnation of the creator god Vishnu, who's also the god that shows up to Oppenheimer and says I'm dead now. That same god, he has another incarnation, it's called Vamana or Vaman. So I think about okay, maybe like it phonetically resonates with Dev woman, and Dev means God. So whenever you're talking about, I'm using my token Indian card to peddle this in. Sorry, but but I thought about that. What Dev is literally translates to God or in Sanskrit or Devanagari. And Bowman, I thought some American would pronounce Vaman as Bowman. Okay, whatever. So I thought about, okay, so, but that story is pretty, it has some sort of synchronicity with the whole imagery of 2001. In that sense, that it's a story about a dwarf who comes up, Lord Vishnu has reincarnated himself as a dwarf because he sees a king in the country who has become all too powerful. And even though he's noble, but he is born from, he's a demon born. He's a noble king, but he's born from a demon. But so the gods say we cannot allow him to rule. He's a good king, but he's a demon, so we cannot allow him to rule on this earth because we need earth. We are the ones. We do not need demons. So Vishnu comes as a reincarnation of a dwarf man, and dwarf literally translates to Vaman, and he says that king, since you are so generous and benevolent, can you give me three paces of land? And he said, why not? You are welcome to my kingdom, so you can take three paces of land. So first he takes one pace, and in one pace it said that he covers the entire earth just in one step. It's like he captures the entirety of earth. And it's a fantastical story, don't take it literally. It's a folktale. So the king, he's very astonished, and then he says take the second step, and then he covers all the cosmos in the second step. And the king realizes that okay, this is not a normal human being. He should have figured it out by the first step, but he says, oh, this is a god. So he kneels down before him, and then with the third step, the Vishnu in reincarnation, he pushes him down to the underworld so that he could live there. So if I can, analogize this with Dave Bowman, what is Dave Bowman? It's the triumph of humanity over this all powerful AI ecosystem that is all seeing, all controlling, and thinks of themselves as rationality. They are not human, they are like not, they do not have humans in them. They are kind of artificial. So that was the problem they had with them. This king does not represent us. This king is a demon born, even though he's good, even though he's efficient, even though he's maybe righteous. So I think about that scenario of a dwarf human competing with this all technological god, and then him triumphing over that king, and then literally taking out his brain and going to the underworld with him and sending him there and killing him. So that sort of resonated with me in that sense. Maybe this story might have creeped into it, or he would have read it and thought, oh, it kind of fits. Because a lot of stories in Kubrick movies goes like this. So it's like there is some. I thought, just a thought. I do not
Well, I want to
quote the
I want
story.
to add something into that circles back around to this the idea of projectiles and archery and whatnot. Um, I think I need to make a slide on this, but the archery theme is associated with the Trinity test as well, right? When Oppenheimer says, "I am become death," he's talking about the story in the Bhagavad Gita with Arjuna, and he sees himself as Arjuna, the reluctant bowman, right? He doesn't want to kill. He doesn't want to kill people with his arrow, and so I think I haven't pieced it all together yet, but I think that the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Saturn rockets and the Armstrong thing are all going to be this um, are all interconnected imagery. I just wanted to register that Arjuna was an archer. Wait,
Yeah, yeah. He was the greatest of archers.
yeah, see that? Yeah, that's going to be a big thing. I'm going to have to talk about that at some point. Um, we've got 7 minutes. Let's speed run these last ones, okay? Otherwise, I'll never get to them. Very quickly, this is not definitive. I wouldn't say, see, JFK is Jesus because he's here with donkeys, right? Like the Democratic logo is the donkey. I think with all the other Christic imagery that we've looked at, I think in a way it adds a little bit more texture to it. I just wanted to put this out there, and this clearly, this is the Palm Sunday thing where Jesus comes into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. Not to mention the other the Christic elements that are involved in the Kennedy assassination. Both of them die on a Friday, right? So there's that element to it too. We can go to the next one. We're going to talk about Apollo and Muses, or we're going to talk about the Kennedy Space Center. I've talked about this a little bit. The fact that they so quickly renamed the Kennedy Space Center after the assassination of JFK. You would think that there was a lot going on, a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, whodunits, trying to figure out who killed the man, perhaps, but it was all open and shut. But high priority was renaming Cape Canaveral to the Kennedy Space Center. And when you think about it, like this mat where they assemble the rocket, this big assembly box, and taking the rocket that's like a shrine that they light up on night and use a slow mover in and out of that to the launch pad. It really does feel like there's something like a sacred space, like these ziggurats, these cathedrals, these pyramids from the past that aim to reach into heaven. And the fact naming it Kennedy and the transference of essence from different artifacts, I think there's something to this. I could go deeper into it, but like I said, we have a little bit of time left. I don't know if there's much more to say than that. If someone wants to comment.
In the Golden Bough, it talks about death being carried away from the village to cleanse our earth. So if you're
Right.
saying the essence of Kennedy, it might be says we are repenting for our sins or something, and we are sending this deathly spirit of Kennedy away to the moon to be reborn or something.
Yes.
So it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. The name has been taken and put on this building, and now it's going to go to the moon. Okay. Let's talk Apollo. Let's talk about Apollo, why he is the king of muses, or what it means if he is in fact the king of muses. Jordan, would you mind reading this passage from the Odyssey for us?
Sing in me, muse, and through me tell the story of that man skilled in all ways of contenting, the wanderer, harried for years on end, after he plundered the strongholds on the proud height of Troy.
Right. So the whole Odyssey starts with an invocation indirectly to Apollo, who is in charge of all the muses. So the Odyssey itself is, in a way, being bestowed upon Homer via Apollo, right? And what's so fascinating about this is that Apollo and the main character in the Odyssey, Ulysses or Odysseus or whatnot, have a bit of a symbiotic relationship. We've talked about the stringing of the bow incident and the strong arm and Armstrong, et cetera, et cetera. So I think with that in mind, it makes more sense that Kubrick called his film 2001: A Space Odyssey and had the main character be Dave Bowman, because this is putting it within the mythological context of the Odyssey, whose author indirectly is Apollo. And so I feel like that makes a very strong case that Kubrick is aligning himself with the Apollo missions and 2001: A Space Odyssey and putting it all in sort of the mythological universe. And you can see this too, right? That the Apollo missions and Kennedy as the Ulyssian figure have this symbiotic relationship. Their destinies are intertwined. This is an image of Apollo with the muses that are parading are circumambulating him. They all have different roles. I did not know this. I did not know about all the different muses. Like Cleo is associated with history. I got to put my glasses on to see the other ones here, but they all have a different type of poetry, and it's considered expansive what exactly that is. Thalia is associated with comedy, pastoral poetry. There's one that's associated with tragedy. Mel Melpomene or something like that, right? All of these elements, and if one really wanted to, and this is not a good assessment so far, I think it requires a lot more discernment than I've given here. If Jordan, you want to go to the next slide, you can see that all these different muses have their role in the Apollo mission. So clearly, there's the tragic element with Apollo 1. There's all the humorous things, the naming conventions, the jokes, the San Antonio Rose from outer space, the dance elements, the movement elements, the astronomy elements, all these different muses, if you wanted to, you could say track with certain aspects of the Apollo missions. And we can even get into it a little with even greater granularity if you want to go to the next slide. You can start to talk about certain muses having a core function and then other muses possibly having a secondary function. For instance, like I said, Melpomene, the muse of tragedy, clearly because of the Apollo 1 disaster is front and center, but there are other elements to that as well, like Polyhymnia is the muse of ritualistic silence or something like that, right? So I just thought this was an interesting exercise. I had never really, and don't screenshot this and say, oh, Luke has proven out that all these different muses coordinate with these types of Apollo missions. It requires a lot more work than what I've done here. I just really, to be honest, I had the AI. I was like, if we were to do this, how would you do it? And it's like, well, I think it kind of roughly goes like this. But there's a lot more history that one has to go into to say definitively. And I don't even know if you could really prove it if you tried your hardest. But the major point is that all the elements of Apollonian poetry can be found in all the Apollo missions. We can have debates about which one is predominating in different missions at different moments. They all seem to be kind of mixed together, and it might be kind of artificial to carve them up like this. And with that, I think I have covered everything that I prepared to talk about today. So you two can finish the show.
Would you be kind enough to provide sources for these Apollonian poetry motifs? Like,
Sure.
did this? Yeah, you could put that in the description. I wanted to read this in my spare time, so I'll read it as homework.
Yeah.
You ought to give homework to us.
No. Well, I
Mm.
kind of do. I told you to watch the Route 66 and the As the World
Did you?
Turns and the Nescafe
Okay,
commercials. If it's
that's all
really
right.
important. And there's always the reading.
Reading, it's pretty light. It's too sparse for what we're endeavoring here.
Yeah. I know. I know. Maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe I'll let you take the lead and you can teach us the
No,
golden
no.
bough. Yeah. Okay. All right. Jordan, do you
Uh,
want to say anything in closing?
This one was fabulous. Thank you for your dedication to this endeavor, Luke. Thank you, Ostic, for joining us each week. I know a lot of energy goes into this. And thank you, Luke, for letting us share your birthday
Hmm.
today and continue unraveling this incredible mystery that is, I would say, the Earth experience. I'm excited to see what insights you get over this next year.
Yeah. I get unlock some birthday downloads.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.